Taigi, sveiki. Labą dieną, tikiuosi mane girdite. Jeigu mane girdite, tai pamirksėkit, palinksėkit, bus lengviau man kalbėtis su ekranu. Kaip suprantu, kažkas šypsosi, tai reiškia, kad mane girdi. Tai sveiki visi, sveiki atvykę į Life Sciences Xmas, Trends and Spells, tai specialų prieš kalėdinį vakarėlį, aš sakyčiau, žinių mugę. Šiandien girdėsime 4 pranešimus apie gyvybės mokslus, 3 iš tų pranešimų bus iš už jūrų marių. Tai, na, užsienio pranešėjai, turėsime taip pat vieną ir lietuvį, turėsime renginio pabaigoje kvizą, kuriame galėsite sudalyvauti ir pamankštinti smegenis, bus 2 etapai po 20 klausimų. Tai apie viską iš pradžių. Pirmiausia, turbūt noriu padėkoti Jums, kad šiandien prisijungėte, kad vis dar jungiatės. Dabar mūsų yra bent 60. Galime išbandyti chato funkciją. Jeigu kažkas matote jį, pamėginkite kažką parašyti, pasakykite, iš kur sveikinatės, iš kokio miesto, iš ar organizacijos, ar iš kur kitur. Kadangi šį chatą naudosime ir viso renginio metu, per jį bus galima užduoti klausimus, kurių aš paskui perklausiu pranešėjų. Ir žinoma, netrukus, ačiū už komplimentą, kažkas sako, kad gerai atrodo, wow, chatas susikūrė, juda krūta, matau, kad reikės čia įtemptai sekti, kad viską sugaudyčiau. Tai neužilgo, aišku, perėsim į anglų kalbą, kaip prasidės pranešimai, bet prieš tai dar noriu paminėti šio renginio organizatorius, tai be abejo MITA ir MITA projekto gyvybės mokslo industrijos plėtros skatinimas žmonės. Tai visus 2020 mokslo inovacijų ir technologijų agentūra MITA aktyviai ieškojo gyvybės mokslo inovatorių, juos konsultavo, kvietė į informacinius renginius, idėjų vystymo ir pristatymų, įgūdžius lavinančias paskaitas, bei surinkė pirmąjį tokį šios industrijos inovatoriams skirtą masterclass programą. O baigdama metus projekto gyvybės mokslų industrijos plėtros skatinimas komanda visus besidominčius Homo sapiens ateitimi ir proto galimybėmis kviečia šiandien pasisemti įkvėpimo kitiems metams ir sudalyvauti šitoje mokomojo pramoginio formato šventę. Tai susipažinkite su tais, kurie prisidėjo prie šio ir kitų MITA organizuojamų renginių Lietuvos inovatoriams šiais metais ir šią akimirką galbūt pamatysime juos bemojuojančius, tikiuosi, jei zoomas nesukrešins. Tai yra Lilita, Lina, Gustė, Dovilė, Rasa, Deividas ir Kestutis. Ar jie mums mojuoja, ar mes juos matome? Nesu tikras, jie bando mojuoti, tikiuosi, kad jūs juos matote. Jeigu ne, tai įsivaizduokite šiuos 7 žmonės mojuojančius, sakom, gal nerizikuojam, gal nesudedam visų į chatą, į Zoomą online, nes gali viskas krešinti visai stipriai. Tai va, tai nėra ko laukti, aš prisistatysiu taip pat, esu Lukas Keraitis, domiuosi mokslo ir technologijų naujienomis, apie tai darau laidas radijoje, televizijoje, Mokslo sriuba, Lukas ir Ludis, kitos laidos, apie tai nemažai komunikuoju, pats stengiuosi parodyti, kas inovatyvaus vyksta Lietuvoje. Tai šiandien pristatysiu pranešėjus, pakalbinsiu juos su jūsų pagalba, su jūsų klausimais. Tai va, tai tiek. Man atrodo, negaiškim laiko, anksčiau turėsim daugiau laiko klausimams, kuriuos dar kartą skatinu visiems rašyti chatą. Mūsų vis dar daugėja, jei kažkas iš draugų jūsų šiuo metu skundžiasi, kad negali prisijungti, tai tegul jie tik tai palaukia dar akimirką ir bus prijungti prie renginio. Tad štai, o dabar persijungkime į anglų kalbą ir taip jau būsim iki renginio pabaigos. So, now I want to say hi to Edward Boyden from USA. Edward, I'm wondering, can you hear me?
I hear you great. Great to be here.
Great. We can see you, we can hear you well. Should I say good morning, good afternoon, good evening? What time is it in USA? Which coast is it? I have no idea.
This is early. It's 7 a.m. here in Boston. And,
okay.
I'm broadcasting from my basement here. So yeah, it's great to be here with you all.
Yeah, thanks. It's good to have you here. So yeah, weekend is about to come here in Lithuania. It's still one day left for you, almost the whole day for you. Just a few words before you begin. I just want to present you shortly. So Edward Boyden, he's a professor of biological engineering, brain and cognitive scientist at the famous Massachusetts Institute of Technology, Media Lab, and the Governor Institute for Brain Research. He is recognized for his work in on optogenetics. And in 2015, Edward Boyden was one of the 5 scientists honored with the Breakthrough Prize in Life Sciences, awarded for transformative advances toward understanding living systems and extending human life. So, Edward, engineering serendipity is the name of your talk. Should I tell anything more, or do you want to go with it and we come back with the questions after your presentation?
I think that sounds great. Yeah.
Yeah. I know your bio is like 2 pages long. I could go on for forever, but maybe give it. Let's give it give the microphone for you, and let's listen for the presentation. Serendipity. For me, it was a new word, so I hope you can also explain that. What do you mean by that? In maybe in your presentation, what do you mean by your engineering serendipity? The name of your presentation. But for now, let's listen to Edward Boyden. So Edward, take it away, and we are listening. 100 people now connected and connecting more. So
wonderful, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, serendipity means luck. If you look at the history of medicine and biology, it's so much driven by luck. There are people who have discovered drugs like penicillin. The technology called CRISPR just won the Nobel Prize a few weeks ago. But these were all found in the natural world. How can we make ourselves more lucky? How can we go and find new technologies that could help with health, new technologies that could help us understand the workings of the mind? Can we go and become lucky on purpose? And so today I want to tell you a few short stories about how we as engineers are trying to increase our luck in biology and medicine. I can do some screen sharing here so that I can show some movies and pictures. Yeah, so I direct a research group at MIT, and we tried to engineer serendipity. We tried to make our technologies that can help biologists and doctors, and we try to accelerate our luck. Now, why do we have to be lucky? Well, the problem is that the brain and the body, healthy and disease states, are so complicated. If we zoom in on the human brain, it's incredibly complex. Some people make the analogy between the brain and a computer, but the brain is far more complicated. In a cubic millimeter of your brain, there are 100,000 brain cells called neurons, and they're connected by these nanoscale connections. 1 billion connections in that cubic millimeter. So it's incredibly complicated. By comparison, a smartphone might have 1 billion switches called transistors in the whole thing. But this is just in 1 cubic millimeter, and brain cells are far more complicated than simple switches. The other problem with the brain is that you have these very high-speed electrical pulses. Brain cells compute using electricity. And the problem is that these are very high-speed electrical changes, and so they're hard to see and they're hard to control. So we really want to understand how the brain generates our thoughts, our feelings. We want to know what it means to be human. What is intelligence? What is creativity? But it's more important than just that. Brain diseases also affect a lot of people around the world. Alzheimer's disease, multiple sclerosis, loss of vision or hearing, injury to the spinal cord. The list goes on and on. And there isn't any brain disease that we can fully cure. And many of these we cannot even treat. My grandmother, for example, has Alzheimer's disease, and there's no treatment that can stop or reverse Alzheimer's disease. So what we try to do is to build tools so we can understand and repair the brain. And that requires us to sort of engineer our luck. Now, how do we do that? Well, we go looking for ideas in old literature. There's old science that's now forgotten. We go looking in the natural world for genes from strange organisms that have interesting properties. We try to go looking for trouble, half-jokingly. We want to find the technologies that will help us understand and repair the brain. But that means we have to go very far from what we know. It's like we need a search, like Google, but on the whole world. So today I'll tell you 2 short stories of how we've tried to engineer our luck and how these are leading to potential treatments for brain conditions that are in actual clinical trials and where this might take us in the future. Let's start with the complexity of the brain. The brain is so complicated, right? I told you earlier about how dense the circuitry of the brain is. How can we see it? If we could make a map of the brain, maybe we could simulate decisions or emotions in a computer. Maybe we could build artificial intelligence that works like the brain. I think this will happen over the next 5 to 15 years. But how do we map the brain in the first place? Well, many of us have seen pictures like this, a brain scan. The media and the press like to show these images a lot. But these brain scans are very crude. They are not measuring actual brain connections. They're measuring blood flow. And each blob that you see, these little yellow shapes, is not a single brain cell. It's millions to billions of brain cells. At the other extreme, we have microscopes, which use lenses to zoom in and see brain cells. But light, which is captured by these microscopes, is kind of a large object. We don't think of this in everyday life because we're looking at even larger objects, but light has a finite size or wavelength. And it's about 1/10 of the size of a brain cell. So we cannot see the wiring of the brain. So in our group, we started thinking, what could we do that would be different from the last 300 years of biological imaging? You know, people have used these lenses for 300 years to zoom in and see the brain. Well, we thought, what if we could take a polymer, like the stuff you find in baby diapers? You know, when you add water to a baby diaper, it swells. That's because of a chemical called a polymer inside that absorbs the water. What if we could take that baby diaper polymer and chemically install it inside brain cells? If we could do it very evenly, weaving this spider web-like mesh inside the brain cells, outside the brain cells, in between molecules, around molecules. If we add water, the baby diaper polymer would swell and make the brain bigger. So amazingly, this works. In panel B is a small piece of the mouse brain, and in panel C is the same piece of the mouse brain about a day later. We've made it 100 times bigger. And because the polymer, the baby diaper material, is so dense, we are actually making the brain bigger with the resolution down to molecules. What this means is we think it will soon be possible to use our technology to map the brain. You can make brain cells have different colors, and then by expanding it with our baby diaper technology, you can see the very fine wiring and connections of the brain. So my hope in the coming years is that we can make maps of the brain with our technology, and those maps will be so detailed that we can see the finest connections between brain cells. And because we have the wiring of the brain, sort of like having a map of the wiring of a computer, we should be able to simulate brain functions like thinking and emotions. For me personally, I hope that we will understand something about the human condition. What does it mean to be human, to be happy, to have a thought, to make a decision? But also, I think this will have a lot of impact on the field of AI. Currently, machine learning, or AI, is very powerful, but it cannot create new ideas. It cannot understand the way that the human brain does. Now, a very interesting thing is that a new technology for studying the brain can have a lot of impact throughout medicine. After we showed people that we can make the brain physically larger, a lot of people contacted us. It turns out many causes of death, many diseases, if you catch them earlier, you could save more lives. For example, many cancers. If you can catch the cancer earlier, you could remove it. But if the cancer spreads, then it's much harder to treat. So we collaborated with many doctors and showed that we could expand cancer biopsies that are removed by doctors. And by making them bigger, we could do more accurate diagnosis. One way to think of this is early in a disease, the changes in the body are very small. But if we physically make them larger and more obvious, we can see them. So this is an example of serendipity in action. Who would have thought that a baby diaper chemically installed in a brain could help us map it? Or chemically installed in a cancer biopsy would help us detect a disease earlier. But by going and looking for unconventional ideas and then seeing if we could transplant these into biology and medicine, we're trying to accelerate and improve our luck. That's the first short story I wanted to tell you. And the second short story I want to tell you addresses a different problem of the brain. How can we repair the brain? Well, of course, there are many drugs that can be given to treat brain conditions, but they don't work very well. Also, there are many examples where people try to stimulate the brain with electricity, but they're not very accurate. So we started thinking, what if we could control the brain with light? As I told you earlier, brain cells compute using electricity. If we install little solar panels in the brain cells, then we can shine light on the brain cells and control them. What, though, can we use as a tiny solar panel? To make a tiny solar panel would be very hard. If we had one, though, then we could bring light into the brain because the brain doesn't feel pain, and we could turn brain cells on. We could activate them and maybe correct a brain disease. Well, we thought about this for many years, and again, can we make ourselves lucky? Rather than trying to invent a little solar panel, could we find one? Well, it turns out that all over the tree of life, there are little natural solar panels. So in this image, we're looking at a single-celled green algae, a single-celled plant. There's a brownish spot inside the algae, which responds to light. This spot, called an eye spot, contains proteins. These proteins convert light into electrical signals. Basically, they act like little solar panels. This is exactly what we want. So again, trying to be lucky, going and looking for the solution out there could be a valuable way to go. But now we had to be even luckier. Could we put these little solar panels in a brain cell? Well, it turns out that we were lucky in multiple ways. First of all, this protein, it turns out, was encoded by a small gene, a small piece of DNA. We could put the piece of DNA into a brain cell. And then we got even luckier. The brain cell could make those little solar panel-like proteins and install them in the brain cell membrane or boundary. This was extremely serendipitous because who knows, maybe it would have just killed the brain cell. After all, it's a gene from a plant, right? And then we got even luckier. When we shined light on the brain cell, the little solar panel-like proteins would respond, and they would allow us to activate the brain cell with light. This was just an amazing stroke of luck. Now we could take the gene that encodes for that light-activated protein and install it in some brain cells and activate them with light. It's the most precise method for controlling the brain that has been invented to date. So what can we do with this? Well, I'll give you an example by my colleague Li Wei Sai at MIT. She is an expert on Alzheimer's disease. She took mice that were engineered to get Alzheimer's-like symptoms and genetically installed our light-activated protein in their brains. she found something really surprising. If you activate the brain at a certain frequency, 40 times a second, the brains got better. Now, Alzheimer's, of course, there are no treatments that can slow or stop or reverse the disease. So the idea that you could drive the brain with light and stop Alzheimer's was extremely exciting. But the team went on, under Li Wei's leadership, to see if we could do it non-invasively. Putting a gene into the brain or a light guiding optical fiber to the brain is invasive. And so Li Wei's team went on to find, with our help, that if you could drive the same 40 cycle per second frequency by having mice watch a flickering light or hear a clicking sound, basically having them watch a movie. And so now we are doing clinical trials with actual Alzheimer's patients, having them watch essentially a movie, a flickering light and a clicking sound. So again, it shows how looking at non-traditional sources for ideas can be very powerful. I'll give you one other story. Could we use this technology, which we call optogenetics, opto for light, and genetics because it's a gene, could we use it in humans directly to treat diseases? In the Alzheimer's example, Li Wei's team used the technology to make a discovery and then designed a potential therapy, the movie. But could we put the molecule directly into the nervous system? Well, some people are trying just that. Right in this diagram, we're looking at the retina in the back of the eye. This is the part of the eye that captures light from the world and translate images so that our brains can understand the world. But millions and millions of people have blindness. They have lost the photoreceptors that capture light. What can we do? Well, light can still get into the eye. So a question then is, what if we can take our light sensors, those genes that encode little solar cells, and install them in the remaining parts of the eye? Could you make the eye into a camera? Well, we've collaborated with several groups now, and people have shown that this might work. You can put the gene for this light-activated protein into the eye, and cells in the eye will express it, kind of like a camera. I'm going to try to show you a few movies here with blind mice, and I hope they come through. Here's a blind mouse that's in a water maze. It's a maze with some water, so the mouse will swim, and the mouse is trying to escape to find a platform and crawl out. So this is a blind mouse. It's lost the photosensing cells. It's swimming around, and finally, just by searching, it finds a platform and crawls out. Here's a different mouse. The mice like to swim around, so they eventually find the platform, but they're not finding it through vision. They're finding it through trial and error. I think you get the idea. Now, the next movie I show you will be the same kinds of mice, but they got one dose of this gene that encodes for the light-sensitive protein. So in theory, their eyes should have little virtual cameras in them. Okay, here's the treated mouse. As you can see, it can go right to the platform and crawl out of the water. So this optogenetic potential treatment for blindness actually is under clinical trials in France. And earlier this year, we were very excited to hear that using our molecule, they had moved to the next phase of clinical trials. So we're very excited that perhaps this could not only inspire science about how to treat brain disease, but maybe it could enable brain disease treatments directly. All right, I've told you a couple short stories today where by looking for very non-traditional sources of ideas or non-traditional sources of molecules like the natural world, we can help accelerate brain science. We're engineering our lives to be more serendipitous, more lucky. I think there's a pattern now, and I think we can teach others how to become more lucky. There's a 4-step strategy. First, you look around in old scientific literature, in the natural world, and you make an invention. One invention I told you about was how we use the baby diaper technique to expand brains. The second is how we can use genes from the natural world to make the brain controllable by light. Step 2, we help people make discoveries. We're helping people map the brain with the hope that maybe this could help inspire new artificial intelligence. We're helping Alzheimer's experts learn how to control the brain with the hope that maybe they can discover new treatments for intractable brain diseases. But importantly, we need to design practical versions of the therapy. As I showed you, our Alzheimer's colleague, Liwei Sai, went on to use the optogenetics to make a discovery, but then later designed a simple movie that people might watch in order to become better. We want to be very practical. If we want to help the world, to alleviate suffering, to bring the world new practical techniques that can have impact on life, we have to be designers. And that brings us to step 4, deployment. We have to get these ideas out of the laboratory and into the world. One of my hopes is we can catalyze a global neurotechnology entrepreneurial network to help people build businesses to get these ideas out of the laboratory and into the world. This is a very, very challenging enterprise. And so we need every branch of the sciences, every branch of the human condition to work together to make these tough, intractable diseases a thing of the past. And with that, I'll end. This is a slide I love to end on because it contains so many names. The work I talk about represents work from all over the world, literally hundreds of people working together to make these techniques possible. And that, in the end, is the ultimate serendipity or luck engineering strategy, to bring people together, because the whole is more than the sum of the parts. The community can do more than what one person can do alone. And with that, I'd love to wish you a great holiday season and new year. And I hope that some of the things that I've talked about can be useful to you. Do not hesitate to get in touch. We work with people all over the world to try to solve problems. Have a great day.
Thank you, Edward. A virtual applause is going your way. Oh, we can see quite a lot of people, so let's give a round of applause for Edward. Yeah.
Thank you. Very grateful.
Really amazing presentation, Edward. Very clear and very informative. And you touched, let's say, 2 topics. One is in the sense of optogenetics, and the other one is about luck. I really loved how humble in such a modest way you can talk about simulating brain functions like it's a normal everyday deal. It sounded very for me, it was quite amazing to hear. We have some questions from the audience, and
Absolutely.
I ask you all to, you can write your questions still. I'll just read it out loud. So
Sure.
Evelina is asking, what about little electronic impulses for healing the depression? Can you heal depression with the electronic impulses? What have you tried that? Have you experimented on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. There are a couple studies that have shown that delivering magnetic pulses to the brain might help people with depression. And another team has shown that a brain implant, bringing a thin spaghetti-like wire into the brain and targeting a specific region, can help very depressed people to become better. Now, it's still early days. These techniques are not widespread. And I think it's because the brain is very complicated. How do we get it to work for everybody? Because everybody's brain is different.
Yes.
And so that's one reason why in our group, we've been focusing on making maps of the brain and finding ways to control the brain more precisely. The brain is so complicated. We need to find ways to target maybe this region in me, and this region in you, and this region in somebody else. But I would predict in the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to learn so much about the detailed wiring of the brain that maybe we can find ways to target these very small and subtle regions more accurately. Yeah, wonderful question.
Yeah, great. Thanks. Thank you for the question, Jurate. And We have still a few more questions. I want to ask you, since you mentioned the implant in the brain, and I just, as I guess a lot of people here just thought about Elon Musk and Neuralink. So it looks like they are doing well without it. Without the, I mean, they are good at PR. We all know that. Can you comment a little bit on how are they doing? Have you been skeptical about their latest developments, like most of the neuroscientists I talked with? And do you think you could help them with your research in any way? Like how would you compare with it?
I think of Neuralink as a systems integration technology. So they did not invent the electrode, they did not invent the microchip, they
Yeah.
didn't invent the computer, but they're assembling it all into a system. Many electrodes, many microchips, many computer, all integrated into a massively parallel system. So I think in one sense, it's a very practical thing to do because we know that each individual part alone is useful. On the other hand, I don't think any part of the technology is a completely new kind of thing. And that's okay. You might argue that's what businesses are for. They can take an academic prototype, the kind of thing that a graduate student or professor might invent, and then make it reliable and professional and high quality control. But there's still some unsolved problems, and I don't know if anybody solved them. One problem is that electrodes don't last forever. Over time, they degrade or wear down. And if we want to record for the human brain, not just for a few months, but for a year or 5 years or 10 years, then I think this might still be an unsolved problem. The brain creates scar tissue, and the electrodes eventually don't work.
Yeah.
So for me to get a brain implant, I don't want to have a new surgery every year. You know, you'd want it to happen once and then last for your whole life. And so I think I sometimes say the hard part of neuroengineering is the neuro part. What's happening in the brain when you put an implant in? And I think that there might be some improvements in this in the coming years. But again, I don't know anybody who's completely solved this problem already.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. But it sounds like Elon Musk could use your research in one way or another when it's finished. Am I
Well,
right? In some way or another.
well, as I mentioned, one of our technologies, the optogenetics, is in direct human trials for blindness.
Hmm.
If that works, then optical interfacing to the brain potentially could avoid the scarring because you're not placing a wire touching the brain cell. You could have an optical system that's far away, right? Imagine a laser that would shine from far away and a camera that would collect light from far away. If you're not touching the brain, you might not induce scar tissue in the brain. So one hope that I have is that if these blindness trials go well, the ones that I mentioned that is being led in France, then maybe it would open up a new era of optical brain interfacing.
Yeah. And when do you think the blindness trials are going to give any results? When can we hear from it? Like, what is the date when you expect for some kind of insights or results from the trials?
Yeah, great question. So it's being led by a company called GenSight, which is co-founded by Molton Ruska and Jose Alain Sahel and other experts on ophthalmology and blindness. I'm not involved with the company in any way, but one of their core technologies was from our group at MIT. So they haven't published any of the efficacy data to my knowledge, but they did announce earlier this year that they went from the first phase of the clinical trial to the second phase. So I assume that they have some kind of progress. But of course, as good scientists, we should wait to see the data before making any firm decisions.
Okay. Okay, thank you. And we have a few more questions. And even though I'm talking now at the moment and I'm having my own questions, I also want to use the chance to ask those. But you can all write the questions in the chat. I'm definitely going to read it. And Kastut is asking, I'm not sure if that's on the topic, but we'll see. What do you think about magic mushrooms and their impact to human brain? So, yeah, that's the question.
Yeah, great question. Well, psychedelics, mind-altering drugs, of course, have a long history in human civilization, in some societies going back thousands of years. And of course, in the 20th century, there was a a backlash where many countries banned these. But in the last few years, there's been a resurgence of interest. In the United States, for example, ketamine, which causes hallucinations and has anesthetic and sedative properties. Recently, at low doses, it was approved for treating depression. So I think there's a big resurgence of interest. The problem, of course, is that we made so little progress on brain diseases, and people, of course, want help. And I predict that in the coming 5 to 15 years, we're going to see a lot more interest in psychedelics and mind-altering drugs because they might actually have potential benefits for the brain. Right now, actually, I've started to talk to people from all over the world. What can we learn from, in a respectful way, different cultures, different societies? I recently talked to a neuroscientist from Peru, and there are many plants in South America, for example, which might have interesting healing properties. If we could help these people understand more about what the plants do to the brain, maybe this could help us drive different therapeutic strategies. So this is very early days, but I think that it goes back to the engineering, luck, or serendipity theme. The natural world has all sorts of interesting resources, but we as scientists need to understand them. Yeah, very good question.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Edward, and thank you, Justus, for asking. He's saying that it was a good answer. So Lina is asking, how close are we to downloading consciousness into computers? 2030, 2050s?
Yeah, this is a question I think about a lot. Suppose we could make a map of the human brain so good that you could simulate an entire human brain. And as I mentioned, with technologies like our diaper brain expansion technology, making very detailed maps of the human brain might be possible. Well, here's the thing we don't know. We don't know how to measure consciousness. For example, you don't know even if I'm fully conscious for sure, right? Maybe I'm just a very accurate robot. So this is the big problem, right? And as science evolves, over the centuries, we've seen that the boundary between philosophy and science shifts. People used to wonder, what is life? And now we can explain a bacterium, and almost nobody thinks that a bacterium has some kind of mystical property about it. But consciousness, we cannot yet have a way to measure. I think the biggest problem is that science struggles when we cannot measure something. Suppose you loaded a program into a computer to simulate a given person's brain. How would we know if it's conscious? We cannot shine a light on the computer or apply a sensor and tell whether it's feeling a sensation or not. So I think we need to discover ways of measuring consciousness. I don't yet know how to do that. But maybe one way, going back to our earlier topic, would be to induce different subjective experiences. Maybe by brain stimulation, maybe by using chemical strategies, and then see how those perturbations of the brain map onto felt conscious experiences. So this could take many years to make an atlas of human experience, but maybe that's what we need to do in order to understand what consciousness really is.
Interesting. We have a lot of great minds in this chat, I believe so. So if anyone has any idea how to measure consciousness, you can write it down on the chat. We'll use it for sure. Edward would be happy to hear that.
Oh, yeah.
That's my guess.
We collaborate with people all over the world. I think this is a truly global endeavor, solving the brain. And I would love to find ways to collaborate. Can we build tools to help people? Can we learn what problems people have that they cannot solve? And then we can work together. So we're very excited about how to catalyze global networks of collaboration. And as I mentioned, people in France using our techniques to try to treat blindness, speaking with people in Peru about plants that might be interesting for future therapies. This is truly a global enterprise.
Great. And the last question, I guess, we have is from Gintare. She's saying, Hi, Edward. Thank you for a wonderful presentation. Do you think that the blood-brain barrier is a huge problem for the compounds to treat the neurodegenerative diseases?
Great question. Yeah, so the blood-brain barrier lines the blood vessels of our brains and prevents things from going from our bloodstream into the brain. And so things that have a molecular weight that's above a very small number, like 150, the size of a small molecule, they cannot get into the brain very well. So I think we do need to have better strategies for getting things across the blood-brain barrier. In our group, we're part of collaborations looking at two different strategies. One idea is, are there parts of the blood-brain barrier that are thinner or easier to get across? For example, the passageways from our nose into the brain have less blood-brain barrier than other parts of the brain. So what if we could apply therapies through the nasal passages into our nose? Another idea is to evolve molecules to cross the blood-brain barrier. So what does that mean? Well, evolution makes all sorts of interesting things, right? That's sort of the underlying story behind a lot of the questions we're talking about. Whether it's optogenetics or psychedelics from magic mushrooms, evolution produces all manner of things. Has evolution made anything that can get into the brain across the blood-brain barrier? If it did, we could attach that thing to our drug and get it into the brain better. So I'm thinking a lot right now, how can we screen through the natural world to find molecules that might have this property? We know lots of things do, right? Nutrients get into the brain, hormones get into the brain. Many things do get into the brain just fine. And sort of in line with the theme of engineering our luck, could we look for such things and use them as tools?
Great. Thank you very much. And thank you, Edward. I believe that during this presentation and during this talk with us, you just maximize your chances of luck, and you did just more serendipity, because now there are around 100 people more who knows the questions that are in your mind, challenges that you face. Okay, we have one more question. Can we do it really fast?
Sure.
The 10% of the brain myth is a widely perpetuated theory that most or all humans can only use 10% of their brains. Is it true? I think I know the answer.
Well, there are two answers. One is we don't know how we use our brain completely right now because many parts of the brain are not well studied. But I personally think we're using all of our brain all the time. Let me give you a couple examples. You're taking a bath or walking through a forest and an idea pops into your head. Where did the idea come from? Or you recall a memory from childhood, or you have a sudden spark of creativity and start humming a tune. Well, most of our brain is working even if we're not aware of it. Maybe during a night of sleep, your brain generates a new idea, and the next day, you have the idea. But of course, your brain's been working on it long in advance. So I think we use our brain in many ways that we do not understand. The subconscious is working on so many things, and our consciousness is only aware of a small number of them. So that's my personal opinion. But there are many parts of the brain that have not been studied well yet. So we have a lot of science to do in the coming years.
Yeah, that's a hard question. But anyway, thank you very much, Edward. So happy to have you here. Thank you very much for a very clear and understandable presentation on such a really not an easy matter. So thank you very much. Have a nice day, nice Friday still in front of you. And we're saying thank you very much, and we are saying goodbye for now. So thank you, Edward.
Great. Well, stay in touch. We're always excited to help solve problems.
So yeah, that was exciting, wasn't it? I can see from your questions, I can see from your faces, from the people who are connected online. It's so nice to see you, actually, some of you who are with your cameras on. I almost forgot to tell you that, most of us, the guys from MITA and me myself, are with the jumpers, with some Christmas moves. Yeah, Merry Christmas they have. Yes, now I just watch them and I remember that. So hopefully you also have some Christmas mood around you. Kestutis definitely has a lot of trees, Rasa with a nice snowman. So yeah, just Yeah, I can see you. Other guys, cool, cool. And thank you very much for the questions. Let's keep it up. I think it's very nice for the presenters to also see that you're listening, that you're active. So let's keep it up. And now, without further ado, I would like to say hi to Alto Pesola. Hi, Alto. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Hi, Alto. How are you?
Very good, thanks. All good here, and it's already pretty dark in here in Finland, but otherwise all is good. We have some snow even in here, so all good.
So same here in Vilnius. It's also getting dark already, and I think you just won the Christmas sweater competition without a doubt with your reindeer. Very nice, great.
Because I'm from the country of Santa, so I thought I need really good effort on this.
Yeah, you have to. I guess Santa is already having a lot of work now to do. So I'm just doubting if he's still in Finland at the moment. Maybe he's somewhere here. But anyway, so it's very nice to have you here. I just want to tell a few words before we begin. So Alto Pesola from Finland. He's a research manager in Active Life Lab in XAMK. I was Googling how to pronounce that. Am I right? XAMK?
It's all right. Yeah.
Okay, it's a research and development organization. So he have commercialized his research findings through a startup. It was about sitting and activity analysis platform called Fibion. Yeah, Alto is making the world a better place where people don't need to sit so much. And basically, can I call you a physical activity researcher? That would be right thing to do.
Yeah, I think that's a good term to use, and more specifically, it would be maybe better for me to be called inactivity or sitting researcher.
Inactivity researcher. Okay.
Yeah, I'm trying to convince you in my presentation why, but maybe that would be more accurate.
Great. Okay, so it's very interesting, your presentation, and your topic that you have is called Sit Less, Experience of Overcoming the Distance Between Science and Business from the Home Country of Santa. And you can begin. At the moment, I'm going to grab the other chair that I have. I don't know if you can see this. It's used
cool.
for, it's used, I should use it more often, but it just, I'm too lazy sometimes. But okay, for this presentation, I'm moving to this chair, which allows me to sit with my back straight. So that's my part in it. So okay, Alto, you can begin now, and in the beginning we'll have some questions. So take it away, and we are listening.
Thanks a lot for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be involved in your nice evening. So my background is in scientific research. I did my PhD in 2016 about the health effects of sitting less. And in the last decade, this topic of sitting too much has been around quite a lot. I think all of you have seen news about how sitting is the new smoking and sitting kills and so on. So nowadays we understand much better that just laying down and sitting is not good for our health. And although it might sound like self-evident nowadays, it wasn't so, let's say 10 or 20 years ago. 2 weeks ago, the World Health Organization published new physical activity guidelines. And for the first time in, say, 30 years history of the physical activity guidelines, for the first time 2 years ago, these guidelines mention that sitting less is good for your health. And although you might consider that we have known this for decades, it is not true. The scientific research has only started to recognize the risks of sitting too much. And there are many reasons for that. And one reason is that nowadays we are sitting so much that it is much easier to recognize and to measure the health risks of sitting. When we go back 30 or 40 years, we were not actually sitting so much during our everyday lives. We had active jobs and we were more physically active in our everyday lives. But nowadays we are driving more cars and doing more office work. And now these health risks are kind of starting to accumulate. And this is even more timely topic now during the COVID times, and I'll try to give you some data and ideas how the COVID has changes our daily life patterns in relation to sitting. And another thing which has made this research output much more accurate is that nowadays we can actually measure the sitting time very accurately. 20 years ago, these research findings were only based on self-reported data. Think about your daily life for a while. So if you had a questionnaire asking that's how many hours you're sitting today, could you give an accurate answer? What do you think? Is it 5 hours, 8 hours, or whatever? It's very difficult to estimate our daily sitting time. And the reason is that we don't usually even think about sitting down. Sitting is such a strong habit of ours. It's part of our daily life that when we sit down, we don't even think about it. And that's the problem. But for that, to solve that problem, we have conducted scientific studies where we provide people counseling specifically to sit less during their everyday lives or to break up their sitting. And for this purpose, we also established this company Fibion, which is a sitting and activity analysis, and it can very accurately measure your daily sitting time. And I will show you some data and give you some insights through the daily sitting patterns measured with Fibion. All right. Actually, even though Santa might be very busy nowadays, I'm actually a little bit worried about Santa's physical activity because at least this year, because of the restrictions, he has been very passive. And as you can see from his outfit, he's not doing very well. He's gaining some weight and actually he feels very comfortable sitting down, and I'm a little bit worried that he might have elevated blood glucose levels, and I don't know about his eating patterns, but I wouldn't be too confident that he's eating enough vegetables either, because in Lapland they are eating a lot of reindeer and red meat, so that's not so good for your health. And actually, we wanted to help Santa a little bit, and that's why we measured his daily sitting time. So next, I will show you some data about how much Santa is actually sitting down during his daily life. And the result was a little bit worrying for me. So here you can see Santa's sitting time, and we found out that he's sitting more than 12 hours per day. And this was measured with Fibion device. Here you can see with the red circle that Santa is sitting 12 hours and 36 minutes per day. And this is not very this is actually very typical for other Finnish people as well, because on average Finnish people are sitting more than 10 hours per day. So I don't know about you guys, but we are sitting quite a lot. Maybe it's about the darkness, or maybe it's so cozy inside and warm inside that we want to sit down. But we are sitting a lot. But on the other hand, we have a lot of physical activity. Finnish people are pretty physically active. So we go out, we do the exercise, but then when we go back inside, we are only sitting down. So our idea about physical activity is a little bit skewed. So we think as physical activity only those things which are conscious, like physical activities, when you wear your sneakers and when you wear your sweatsuit, only these things are considered as physical activity. And I think this is a little bit problematic because there's so huge potential in changing our daily sitting time instead of focusing only exercise for fitness. So Santa was sitting 12.5 hours per day, and in addition to that, he had more than 9 hours prolonged sitting time. So he was sitting more than 9 hours in prolonged, more than 30 minutes continuous sitting periods. And this is very bad for your glucose metabolism, actually, because when you sit for prolonged periods of time, your muscles are inactive in your legs. And once these muscles are inactive, their glucose metabolism and also fat metabolism go down very quickly. So that is why after you eat lunch, and if you go sitting down after that, your blood glucose levels remain very high for long periods of time because your muscles are not kind of eating or consuming the glucose that you get from the food. So this is why the prolonged sitting time is very bad. It's even worse than the total sitting time. But if you break up sitting only once in a while, say every half an hour, even for a period of 2 minutes of time, it will improve your glucose metabolism a lot. We will be actually starting a randomized controlled trial in the beginning of next year, which is targeted at people doing office work who have type 2 diabetes. And the aim of the trial is to increase the everyday muscle activity of these people with very short daily breaks and activities. And then we measure their glucose metabolism during 6 months of time. And our hypothesis is that this frequent activation of muscles will improve the muscle activity, of course, but also the glucose metabolism of these type 2 diabetic people. So we hope that they find this trial feasible and also effective on glucose metabolism. So I think Santa should be participating in our trial, but it's a little bit problem because the distance is pretty long. I don't know if he could come to the measurements with the reindeers or anything like that, but we'll see. All right. And this is the activity balance report from Fibion, and this is based on our algorithms where we have collected a lot of scientific research data to be able to estimate the health risks of sitting versus the health benefits of physical activity. So we want to show people if they can kind of cancel out the risks of sitting with their physical activities. And this is from the Santa's report, and it shows that he gets the most negative points from the sitting health risks. So he has a high total sitting time and also high prolonged sitting time. And he got -100 out of -100 negative health risk points. And even though he has some physical activity equaling 86 positive points, still the balance remains on the negative side. So he cannot cancel out the risks of sitting with physical activity because he's sitting so much during his everyday life. So this is a clear point for Santa to develop. Fortunately, we also got some data from elves. So as you know, these little guys are doing all the work for Santa. So he actually doesn't need to do a lot of work. He's only sitting down while these very active elves are doing the job. So here you can see the data from elves. So they are actually sitting only about 7 hours per day, but they are standing for 4.5 hours per day, and they have physical activity about 1.5 hours per day. So they are much more active. And if we check the health report from these elves, we can see that they get only -31 health risk points, whereas the health benefits of physical activity are the same than in the Santa, but they have so much less these health risks points, that their activity balance is much more positive. So this is a good example how you can improve your health only by being active during your everyday life without increasing your physical activity, your consciousness physical activity time. And this is one thing that we want to show with Fibion, that you don't need to be a marathon runner. It's enough to reduce sitting and reduce your prolonged sitting periods, and you can improve your health through that. And this is one of the main mission in Fibion and also in my scientific research. So we should find more effective solutions to increase the total daily physical activity time instead of focusing only on exercise for fitness. In this figure, you can see how our total physical activity time has decreased during the past decades. So our total physical activity time has decreased about 100 kilocalories per day in adults. And this equals, this is actually the same amount that is enough to explain the weight gain at the population level. So if we could increase our everyday activities by only 100 kilocalories per day, that would potentially prevent the weight gain at the population level. And this is also important from the behavioral point of view, because not all people want to exercise. There are many people who don't find exercise motivating or funny, or their kind of identity. It's not about exercise, but it can be about anything else, like arts or music or whatever, but they are not into exercise. So that's why it would be more important to design the day as physically active instead of requiring people to be consciously physically active during their leisure time. And this is what we want to show with scientific research, whether it's effective or not. And this is also what we want to design in this company Fibion, where we want to increase the activity during the everyday life of people. And this is also the point where we come to the effects of COVID on total physical activity time. So what has happened in Finland? We were, of course, expecting very bad results on total daily physical activity of people, but what we have seen based on preliminary data is that this yellow part has decreased in many people. So we are even less physically active during our everyday life that we used to be before COVID. And the reasons are because we are doing remote work, so we are not commuting to work, and we are not commuting back from the work with active methods or even with car. So the only thing we need to do when we are starting our working day is to walk to our computer and sit down and remain seated for the whole day. Before COVID, we were cycling or walking to work or taking bus. We needed to walk to the bus, and it was like this physical activity was designed into our everyday lives, but it's not designed there anymore. On the other hand, people have more leisure time, and they have more freedom to choose what they do during their leisure time because they have more time. And this pink part here, which is leisure time physical activity, has actually increased during COVID. So people are more active during their leisure time because they have more leisure time and more freedom to do things what they want. Of course, there are many restrictions, so there's much less indoor sports nowadays, but outdoor sports and moving in the nature has increased in Finland a lot. It was pretty high already before COVID, but now it's even huge. If you go to visit a nature park or a forest, you can see like dozens or even hundreds of cars parked next to the paths or whatever, and people might be staying in a queue like in the middle of the forest, like in a path, waiting for getting into the forest, which is, we have like endless forests here, so it's quite amazing. But anyway, even though the physical activity time has increased, it doesn't mean that our total physical activity time would have increased. We have more sports, more leisure time activity, but less everyday activity. And this is also one point which we need to consider very closely. So it doesn't mean that if you are moving more during your leisure time, that you would increase your total physical activity time. And this is what we want to prove for people with our research and with Fibion. The things are much worse in children. Total physical activity time has decreased in children much more than in adults. I don't know the exact reason for that, but we had many restrictions for children's sports as well. But I don't know the exact reason for the decreased physical activity in children. Maybe parents are worried and don't let children go out so much, or I don't know. But things are worse in children. So what if we could make Santa be more physically active? If Santa became as active as his elves, he would expend about 100 kilocalories energy more per day, and this would potentially result even in 10 kilograms decreased body weight per year and decrease the risk of type 2 diabetes, and potentially it also have effects on absenteeism, presenteeism, and productivity, even cognition that we were talking in the previous presentation. So one indirect mechanism that can also affect brain health is effects on physical activity on glucose metabolism, and for example, hyperglycemia is a risk factor for brain diseases and for cardiovascular diseases, and this can be one indirect mechanism how physical activity and breaking up sitting can affect positively your brain health as well. All right. A little bit about my background, just to give you some ideas on how to make business from science. So I have tried to make this topic more popular. So I have wrote 2 books about the topic, about my research topic, about sitting less, and then I also participated in Ministry of Social Affairs and Health working group where we formulated first sedentary behavior recommendations to Finland in 2015. And so I have tried to make this topic understandable for people. I think that's one of the most important things to make it happen and make it impactful, and also make business out of it. People need to understand what it's all about. And that's what I have tried to do. And this is also about our path. So we established this company Fibion with my colleague Olli Tikkanen, and we have tried to base it on science as much as possible. So we published our first validation paper in 2018, and on the same year, updated USA physical activity guidelines were published, and this year WHO physical activity guidelines, and these both guidelines are talking about sedentary behavior. So it supports our efforts at Fibion so these guidelines say that it's very important to measure your sedentary time, which has been very good for us. And this is our current team. So we have very strong team, and basically all of us have some sort of scientific background, and so it's very great to work with such people that are enthusiastic, and also we can talk in our own bubble about this about the science of sedentary behavior. So it's very, very fun. And one way that we bases Fibion on science is that we want to show that it's very accurate. So as compared to this kind of consumer gadgets, Fibion is more accurate in measuring sitting and also in measuring vigorous activities. So many of the customer devices are going very wrong in these different activity types. And Fibion is accurate because you wear it on your thigh muscle, so it measures your leg movement, so that makes it accurate. But my main point here is we have did our work, we have read our science, but it doesn't make the business case. When we are trying to sell this accuracy to people, they are telling us that, well, I already know how much I'm sitting. I'm not interested. I don't want to be worried with this topic anymore. It's like we have faced this many times. So even though we have such a good product, it doesn't solve people's problems. The accuracy doesn't solve people's problems. Of course, we are selling this Fibion for scientific research and so on. So there it is fine. But when we try to change people's behavior, it's very difficult. And that's why we are trying to add some content to Fibion, which makes it meaningful for people. When it's related to new diseases and diagnosis, then it's more meaningful in clinical settings. But anyway, it's very difficult. The data doesn't make you change behavior. But now we have started to design online program around this Fibion data. So we need to walk people step by step in changing their behavior. Only showing the high sitting time doesn't make a change. People run away, don't want to listen to the bad news, but we need to give them a solution, an easy solution how to change things. And also we have found out that just go to the people, talk to them, do the sales. They will tell you the best way to find out whether it works or not is to do the sales and find out if people are buying it or not. If they are not buying, just ask them why they are not buying it and make the product better in a way. And also find the right customers, because we are now focusing more on B2B business, because selling this to customers is difficult, but the business case is many times much clearer in the B2B sector. Doctors are very interested in this sedentary time, for example, and they want to use it with their clients. All right, just as a final thing, actually, to be honest, I didn't believe in Santa Claus just a short time back too much, but I was with my little daughter. I was in our nearby park 2 days ago, and I just noticed something red in this one window. And then I zoomed a little bit closer, and I found out that actually this funny guy was actually sitting there and maybe designing the Christmas trips. And this kind of confirms my case, because you can see that Santa is sitting down. So it confirms the 12-hour sitting time. So I was a little bit worried, but then I tried to zoom in a little bit more. And fortunately, I found out that Santa was actually reading his own Fibion report here. So he was already doing things to improve his sitting time. So I was very happy to find out this thing. And even though I was a little bit worried that all these restrictions would force Santa not to go abroad, fortunately there have been very many this kind of reliefs for Santa. So many governments around the world have given exempts for Santa to travel around. So you can tell your children that you can expect Santa to visit also this Christmas, despite the restrictions. So no worries at all. All right, thanks a lot for your attention, and happy to link with you in LinkedIn and in Twitter. And please also check the Physical Activity Researcher podcast by Olli Tikkanen, my colleague, and also visit our lab's website. And I'm open for all kind of collaboration. Thank you and Merry Christmas.
Thank you, Arto. Visual internet online applause goes your way. Hopefully you can see from all the listeners. So thank you very much. Thank you also for being kind of an ambassador on what the Santa does. It's great. It's great that you can keep us updated. And we have been sitting for almost 2 hours now. I guess maybe more, some of us. So now we are going to go for a break. I see some questions in the chat, and I believe that there are some kinds of interesting questions, but if you want, you can just write Arto directly and ask him about his research to give you more background on that. So Arto, we are going to have a 10 minutes break. It's actually 7 minutes break. I think we should all stand up during that time, move around a little bit. Am I right? What should we do in the next 5 minutes when we are having a break? Any recommendations on exercises, or just standing up from the?
Yeah, for the break exercises, yeah. Don't make it too difficult. Standing up is very good. Already 2 minutes of standing is very good. But I have a friend whose philosophy is to have like maximal exercise breaks. So he has like barbells next to his desk, and he's doing maximal exercise only for, say, 1 minute or 2 minutes, and it's his way of maximizing the health effects of breaks. But research shows that 2 minutes of standing every 30 minutes improves your glucose metabolism already. So it's very good. If you go walking, then it's even more effective.
Okay, so thank you very much, Arto, and all of us. Let's move a little bit, at least to make a coffee or some tea. So, and see you in 7 minutes, 15:25 Lithuanian time, when we'll have 2 more presentations coming up. So thank you very much, Arto. Regards and cheers to Finland, and thank you very much for your presentation.
Thanks. It was happy to be here.
And see you all guys in 5 minutes. Let's take a break. Let's stand up a little bit and do some exercise. It's up to you. Sveiki sugrįžę. Welcome back. I just had my apple with my tea. So yeah, it was a short break. Sorry, we did a little bit of overtime with Arto, but I think it was worth it. And you can still have your break if you want, but I encourage you to come back slowly because we have two more presentations ahead of us. Arto is, by the way, answering your questions in the chat, which is great. Thank you very much, Arto. And now let's move on with our third presentation of today. And I want to say hi to Nicholas Bergman, who is in Sweden. So hi, Nicholas, can you hear us?
Yes, good afternoon.
Hi, Nicholas, we can hear you. We cannot see you yet. Can you?
Are you sure you want to see me?
Yeah, quite sure. It's good to see you.
Likewise, likewise.
How are you? How it's going?
It's good. It's good. I'm happy I can wear my Christmas suit.
Wow. Okay. So, wow, that's nice. Can you show it again? I want to see it on full screen. Christmas suit. Wow, nice. Okay. So before I said that Arto won the Christmas sweater contest, but I think you're the first place now with the whole Christmas suit.
Well, it's different. It's different categories, right? Arto is
okay.
that was the sweater.
Yeah. Okay.
I can have my own suit category, right?
Yeah, so that's definitely another category. Okay, so just a few words before you begin. So Nicholas, he's a top futurist speaker with over 20 years of experience as an entrepreneur and technology investor. He's mostly focusing on investments and business development in emerging markets, instrumentation, nanotechnology, computing, new materials, and new media art. Today, he divides his time between investing, speaking, writing, and advising on the future of technology. He's been a long-time member of the Nordic startup scene, investing mostly in science-based innovations and, of course, also in software and internet companies. He's an author of a few books about surviving business-wise in the times of technological uncertainty. So founder, funder, and futurist, Nicholas, I think you should take it away now. Navigating the future, tech trends. I'm looking forward to hear from you, Nick, and we'll be back after your presentation with some questions.
Thank you. Good to be here. And there we go. Cool. Yeah, happy to be here. Although Christmas in Sweden is not very Christmas-like outside. It's kind of a boring warm weather actually, but I'm happy to be here and inside. So good afternoon, everyone. And just to, for me, understand technology and thinking about technology, one very important aspect is how we change our behavior and how we relate to it. I'm sure that most of you still buy books in a bookstore or digital, but bookstores are kind of nice still, I think. I bet very few of you still watch linear TV. That's like the show, specific time in the evening, etc. That sort of shifted into streaming services and on demand. I'm sure that you have your wearables, at least a few of you, the smart watches, if you have that, or whatever it is. It's been around for quite some time, and it's actually quite interestingly moving more and more into healthcare, into wellness, just reference to the previous speaker, all those things around that, which is just really, really interesting. And that's part of the experimentation. They launched these things 5 years ago, 10 years ago, depending, and think it's a communications device or something. And then you realize, no. But I must say, not necessarily good at it. Don't run away and get one of these because I've had mine for 3 years. It's kind of useless, actually. Every once in a while, in my past life, when I was traveling, I could get my hotel key on this ID chip every once in a while, maybe one time out of 5 or 7 or something. So don't run away and get these. And that's, for me, it's sometimes the flip side of for me being an early adopter. I always enjoy trying out new things, see how they change my behavior, my life, different things. And every once in a while, it just don't work. Like the first 3D printer I got, or the first drone I had, with this implant. It's not necessarily working, but it's part of the experiment, trying to see how we can use new things, right? So just very brief background on me. As I was introduced, I worked my whole life more or less with very early stage technology-based startups. I very much enjoy that. I think it's amazing to be able to be around all these interesting scientists and innovators and trying to put my business perspective into their research findings. I've often been part of starting companies, building companies, taking them out to a global market. Very much enjoy that, very much being in the lab, trying to understand what they are doing and translate that into some kind of business. A few years ago, I got a bit fed up with not the innovation and scaling and building businesses out of this, but everything that goes around that, the board meetings, the lawyers, the bankers and all that. So I quit all the boards I was on. Felt really good. I can recommend that. I rarely go to meetings anymore, which is amazing. So instead, I'm able to spend time meeting with interesting people, traveling when that is possible, interacting, discussing, thinking, reading, writing about the future, especially the future of technology and where we're heading. So I really enjoy that. Still do investments. I do pre-seed and seed investments for my own company. And since 6 months back, I'm also part of the European Innovation Council and that venture capital fund that is initiated by the European Commission, working with bridging the gap between innovation and scaling up of businesses. So what we do there is that we have roughly 5 billion euros available and investing that in between 100 and 200 companies per year. So we're just finishing off the first couple of months here. And it's amazing to see all these, what we now call deep tech ideas that's out there. Everything from the first idea in the basement to companies that come a bit further and actually are launching products and services. So both on my own side and through the European Innovation Council, I try to support and invest in companies in all different stages of their existence, at least early existence. So this is a bit of a background, and please reach out if you have these great ideas, especially for the European Innovation Council. For me, taking all these things in, for me, seeing what's happening around me, talking to people, interacting in all different ways, I think that there's 5 different mega trends that we are seeing in society, in the world right now. The first one is that we get older. We not only live longer, we also stay healthy longer. The second part of this is that we see a very definite economic shift to the east, with China, India, Indonesia, South Korea, Taiwan, Japan, all these countries that are booming financially and that are competing with what used to be the old power players here, Western Europe and the US. And of course, eastern central parts of Europe are also gaining momentum here. So relatively speaking, there's less of Western Europe and the US and more of Eastern Central Europe, Middle East, and Asia. We also have a challenge with the environment. There's no discussion about that. Just good to hear and see that politicians finally notice that and come to sort of joint understanding. We have a more and more globalized world, although that's been a challenge in the last 9 months here. We have a more and more globalized world, which is, we're seeing travel and trade and communications and everywhere. And all these 4 trends are fueled by the 5th trend, technology. Technology makes us live longer. Technology improves the lives in Asia and China, for example, meaning that their economies are booming. Technology has been one of the problems when we look at the environment and global warming. Hopefully it can be part of the challenge as well. And technology is, of course, one part of the globalization of the world. And for me, technology is interesting because it doesn't really matter what kind of technology we're looking at. It doesn't matter if the steam engine, if it's electricity being introduced, or if it's the computer. All these things get accepted in roughly the same way. And it's fascinating that because we see how, I mean, with computers, for example, it all started with the mainframe computers. We saw them popping up in the 60s. Sort of experimenting, don't really know what to use them for in the beginning. Then it slowly shifted into the emergence of the personal computer, Windows 95 in the 1990s, and computers in general expanded into society, expanded into our lives. We started using them for personal reasons. So that's the expansion phase, the second phase. The third phase is when a new innovation totally changes the way we live, the way we work. We start building our lives, society around these technologies. And when it comes to IT and computers, of course, it's a smartphone. I mean, we have them now 24/7. We can't live without them. We're totally immersed in these things. And that is for good and for bad. We have all the information we need, the palm of our hand. And at the same time, we get disconnected. We get isolated in these, and we get all the negative side effects of social media and things like that. But in general, of course, this is at least as I see it, a path towards something good. But it's a three-way process. We start by experimenting with a new innovation. It expands into society, and then we build society around this new innovation. So for me, having invested and worked with developing technology and making business sense out of them for more than 20 years, for me, I see this in three phases. First, you need to analyze a new technology, analyze and understand what it is. Then you need to assess the implications, see how these things affect you. And third, you need to adapt to this new reality. You need to understand how you should change your behavior based on what's happening in technology, for example. So what I would like to do is to go through this with you, give you a few examples of what I'm seeing and try to connect that to the world of life sciences to a certain extent. So by doing that, I'm going to give you 5 technologies that I meet very frequently right now. Technologies where I meet researchers, innovators, entrepreneurs, other investors, politicians, that the top 5 technologies is where everyone is talking about right now in my world. Start with number 5, and that's space. We really do see that something is happening in space. Our access to space is increasing. It's now 90% cheaper to launch a payload into space than it was just 10, 15 years ago, meaning that opens up a whole new plethora of opportunities and availability. We see that with microsatellites, you can monitor and see what's happening everywhere around the world, 24/7. You can get that updated frequently. We got resolutions for commercial use, at least down to below 1 meter. For military use, it's even better than that. Meaning that we can identify, analyze, see patterns, see trends. We can see the deforestation of rainforests more or less in real time. We can see how much for example, oil tankers in the Persian Gulf, when they are moving, how much oil are in their tanks. We can see parking lots in shopping malls and see from that the development of the economy. All these things happen because we suddenly have very cheap, advanced microsatellites, cameras, video cameras, analysis equipment up in space. Next thing here is that we see tourism coming soon. Having it been for COVID, I think we would have seen them up as of now, more or less. We got Virgin Galactic, a few other companies working with that. We see emerging ideas around asteroid mining. And that can be mining either so you can make fuel for interplanetary travel to the moon or to Mars, for example, or you can see it for rare earth metal, valuable metals that you mine in an asteroid and take back down to Earth. Still in its infancy, a long way to go there. But what's fascinating here for me is the pure experimentation around this. What is possible? What could be possible? how can we use these things? Then we also see, unfortunately, companies looking at how to do advertising in space, which is maybe not the best idea. I don't think anyone would want to buy products from that company. But again, the experimentation around these things. And finally, with life sciences and healthcare, what we see in space in zero gravity is that, for example, higher crystalline proteins, you can do that with a lot higher quality than down on Earth, meaning they can also use space as a research lab, maybe even for production in the future. So continuing to number 4, the fourth trend that we talk about in my world, robotics in all its forms. Interesting is that robots have been around for the past 100 years in popular culture, in movies and in books and that. We also see that robots have been around in manufacturing for at least 50 years, and that is also improving as we speak. We see that we have robots now that can walk like humans. Not necessarily the most useful thing as of now, but it's really, really impressive from a technology perspective. Maybe in this case, less impressive from a communications perspective, because if you want to sell robotic innovation, maybe you shouldn't dress it up in a uniform gas mask and a pair of boots, because that's probably a way to scare away quite a few customers, right? But still, it's from an engineering standpoint, really impressive to get a robot to walk like this. And then, of course, we have the cute robots like this one. Also very impressive that it can stand up and not fall over on this icy parking lot. Which takes us to another perspective of this, and that is the ethical perspective. How should we relate to these robots? Should we treat them as equals, as pets, as animals, as humans? And of course you can't do like this. I mean, you can't kick around a robot like that. When they launched this video, there were Facebook groups started in defense of the robot, meaning that we actually start thinking about these and start seeing different perspectives of robotics, actually. And then going forward, of course, we have robots that can do things today that they couldn't do just a couple of years ago, moving around in an environment like that. Not going to dwell too much, but just wanted to see that the guy with the hockey stick is the same guy as in the previous video. Not sure about his intentions here, but at least he's not going to have robots as friends in the near future, right? But it's just interesting how we relate to these things. And I mean, robots today, they can do things that we can't. We got robots that can do backflips. And I mean, that is nothing that I can do anymore. Impressive as it is, it's still a very limited use case, unless you want to have a backflip robot in your backyard. More everyday chores, like picking up the trash or taking out the couple of boxes and things like that, is still very complicated for a robot. Meaning that as we're still seeing a lot of improvements in robotics, these generalized robots, that's nothing we're going to see in the near future. More specialized, definitely. And just to give you a healthcare example, I mean, we got exoskeletons, which is sort of in between humans and robots, but very, very useful and started to be quite advanced, actually. We see it in companionship robots in elderly care, for example. We can see it in using robots for desanitation, which is also really useful, especially in these days of the pandemic. So slowly, we start seeing specific use cases for robotics that have left the experimentation phase, and it actually start making it different and making sense to have them in a care facility, for example. Continuing number 3. Virtual reality, augmented reality. I'm sure you try these glasses, and cool as it is, for me, I still get headache and nauseous and motion sickness from them. If you don't, you really have the future in front of you if you can manage these things. I must say, still, these systems are quite early. They're kind of rough. Not necessarily the best resolution in these classes when you talk about virtual reality. It is a challenge, and for this guy, for example, going on a roller coaster ride in a pair of virtual reality glasses, it is difficult for his senses to understand what's actually happening. It is. We're going to get more used to this. Our bodies, our senses are going to get more used to this, and these technologies are going to get better. But still, it is a challenge to find these really good use cases. I mean, for what we've had now in 9-10 months of COVID, I thought we would have seen a greater increase in interest in virtual reality, because that would be the ultimate way of interacting with people like this today. But we don't, and that is a challenge. We don't see it necessarily, and that I think is because we don't have the good use cases yet. We don't have a widespread adoption of people actually owning these devices. Again, back to the experimentation, I think the best experiment I've seen, the best use case I've seen is a virtual reality headset for chicken. A bit of an art project though, but I mean, just imagine putting this on a chicken in a chicken farm, meaning that they think they roam the fields, that they are free, maybe even that they can fly. But instead, they're still confined in their cages or inside. As I said, a bit of an art project here, but still, again, back to the experimentation and how we should relate to these things, trying to see different ways of actually being able to use it. Another part of this is what we call augmented reality, when we see through a pair of lenses. And here we actually start seeing interesting usage, like in an industrial setting, repairing, for example. We see it in gaming, definitely. We see it also in the field of healthcare, in surgery, where Microsoft and their HoloLens team teamed up with Philips with imaging for healthcare. You can actually, in a non-invasive way, see what you're actually doing, get a good sense of what you're about to do before you actually perform surgery. So there are really, really interesting ways of doing this. And I think here it's good to and important to, depending on what you do, but embrace these things to a certain extent. Be curious, be a bit skeptical, but embrace them and see how they can be of benefit for you. Because that's for me is for all technologies, actually. You really need to think from your own perspective. Take these things in, try out, test them, be curious, but don't necessarily just buy everything that someone else says. Don't 100% trust the politicians, or the salespeople, or the scientists, because they have their unique view of looking at this. It has to be useful. It has to be useful for you in your setting, in your line of work, in your life, whatever you do. So make sure that it benefits you and don't distract you too much, for example, when it comes to AR and VR. We continue with number two. Number two, maybe not that sexy, but really, really useful. Of course, talk about high-speed internet, 5G connectivity in particular. It started out with 2G when we could actually start texting each other. With 3G, we managed to use our sort of smartphones, 15 years ago, actually being able to send and receive emails. Not that fast, but it worked. With 4G, we could start streaming Netflix, YouTube, whatever it is, how much we wanted, and it actually works quite well. With 5G, we're going to get 10 times the speed in our cellular networks, meaning that we can stream as much as we want, high definition, whatever we want, whenever we want. Interesting here is that, again, from a user perspective, it's still quite difficult for the telcos to justify the extra cost that this is. It's hard for them to show me as an end user that, okay, you need a 5G connection, because we don't really have the need for that yet. That might probably change in the future, even for consumers, if you want to do holographic movies, if you want to do real virtual reality environments, high definition, etc. But as of today, it's still in its infancy, and we don't really see the use cases. Again, same thing with 3G and 4G. I mean, what we saw smartphones coming, we saw Netflix, YouTube, all these things happening after we got better connectivity and better speed in our networks. So we probably see another line of innovation when it comes to, after we have 5G networks launched, of course. But interesting here, I think, is also from an industrial perspective. How you, for example, can do predictive maintenance in industrial sites and mines like this, but how you can use it, and it's obviously necessary if we're going to have good autonomous driving, but you need to have high-speed connectivity for updating maps or whatever it is. We're going to see it in industrial settings, in chemical plants, to monitor all the different parts of a facility. We're going to see it in monitoring our electric grid. And in most parts of the world, the electrical grid is old and in need of constant maintenance. So if we can monitor these things down to the detail, even in remote areas, that of course is really, really interesting. And then also, of course, either if you're the surgeon or the patient here, you want, if we're going to work with remote surgery, we want a stable connection that is high speed, low latency, and that would be very beneficial both for the patient and for the surgeon performing this surgery, of course. So in all these different parts of all these different business perspectives, that's really, really emerging interesting use cases for 5G. Not really there yet, but we're getting there. And of course, we're also seeing that on the consumer side, there will be a whole lot of new interesting applications, and especially, let's say, within entertainment and gaming, to be looking forward to in the near future. Move on to number one. And of course, the first and top of mind for investors, for entrepreneurs today, are things that in different ways are related to AI. And AI is fascinating. It's that thing that's been around for 50 years. And nowadays, everyone talks about it. No one really knows what it is, but everyone thinks that everyone else is doing it, meaning that I think I need to get my own AI project going as well. This is the perfect tool for scaring up a CEO of a company when you come there as a management consultant trying to sell them something. What is your AI strategy? For good and for bad, we're here for a reason. And this latest AI trend maybe started a bit more than 20 years ago when we had computers that beat the best humans in chess, but really fast computers for the first time. And then in 2011, we had computers that ran databases and algorithms that actually were so fast that they could beat the best people in Jeopardy. Moving forward, another couple of years, like now 3 years ago, when we had the algorithms so good and self-learning that they could beat the best people in Go, this Chinese board game that is 10,000 times better than chess, more advanced than chess, more complicated. And on top of the fast computers, the amazing databases, the self-learning algorithms, we also now have algorithms that can bluff, that can take risks, meaning that we can also beat the best people in poker. I mean, these are examples from different kind of gaming environments where the rules are quite set and confined. In my perspective, I think it is interesting that all these things are happening now, and we definitely have a boom in AI. That said, for me, it's still a bit challenging. I still do think that we have a bubble in AI. For me, working in venture capital in Europe, there was a study from earlier this year, I think, where 40% of all AI startups had no AI component in their offering. Meaning that as good as it is, it's still, to a certain extent, just a label people put on things. You put it on startups to full investors like me, which is quite easy, I must say. You put it in products where you want it to sell it to someone or you want to attract investors, whatever it is. So be a bit cautious, be aware of this, that a lot of AI projects out there are still just a fancy way of saying that you're cleaning up your databases. So that is a challenge. AI is quite often used as makeup on a pig, lipstick on a pig. Not necessarily AI, could be interesting and useful anyway, but not necessarily AI in its rawest form. And so for me, that is still a bit challenging short term. Long term, I really do think that AI, artificial intelligence, machine learning, whatever we call it, have immensely huge, interesting promises and opportunities. But we're not quite there yet in my sense. And again, I mean, we're with a pandemic, with COVID, and with the advances in science, technology, and AI, we managed to map the genome of the virus in just 2 days, which is just an amazing way of showing what we're capable of nowadays. But still, beware of it, still a challenge. So with all these things, for me as an investor, as a member of society, I think I quite often see, especially when I talk to politicians, I see that they are afraid. People are afraid of where we're heading, what's going to happen to us. People are afraid, they look the other way, not necessarily wanting to be part of this, wanting to take it in because it's scary, it's something unknown, it's something different. And that's quite a normal reaction to this, unfortunately. So what I propose and what I always think is the best approach to this is that we should embrace these things. We should be curious and a bit skeptical. We should try to understand how it can benefit us, but not letting someone else tell us how to do these things. We want to do them our own way. I think that is really, really important. So with that, that's the first part of analyzing, understanding these technologies. What I find here is that you also need to get the timing right. You need to understand roughly when this is happening. So you're not being too early, you're not being too late. And here I give you 2 examples of the challenge with timing. These are 2 companies that have a few things in common. Skype, the peer-to-peer telecom company, and Spotify, the music streaming service. They have a few things in common. They both start with the letter S, of course. They were both founded a bit more than 15 years ago. Let's say roughly 15 years ago, a bit more for Skype, a bit less for Spotify. They have a very strong Swedish connection. Both of them have Swedish founders or co-founders. And unfortunately, one more thing is that I, as an investor, turned down both of these investment opportunities when they were very small companies. I turned down Spotify when there were 11 employees from different reasons. Fascinating as that is, a bit tough to still, when I meet with these people, it's sort of a bit emotionally challenging, especially when you realize that the second time they sold Skype, they sold it to Microsoft for $8 billion. Spotify got listed a bit more than 2 years ago at a valuation of $26 billion. Last time I checked, the valuation of Spotify was $49 billion. And but what I learned there is that timing is everything, and timing is really difficult. And what was impressive with Spotify, for example, was that they managed to take a number of different technologies, bundle it, and present it as one application. And the timing there was really good. I mean, they foresee 3G connectivity. They foresee cloud computing, cloud storage, streaming instead of downloading. They foresee the analytical perspective of this, where they could see your listening habits and suggest new music to you, etc. And they did that almost 15 years ago, before we had all these things mainstream. So that was really, really impressive. And once we have the interesting innovations around us, we can identify them, we understand the timing roughly, we can start looking at and assessing how they will affect us. And there's a couple of perspectives here. How will it affect the competition, our competitive stance? How will it affect our customer interactions? Can we improve new things, introduce new things to our customer base? Can we get the customers to come to us and say that they want these things that they've seen somewhere else? But independently, it's a new way of actually trying to understand your customer. And third part of this is to improve your company or your organization, using technology to improve the way you work, improve your productivity, for example. All these three different parts. And then, of course, trying to understand these things in a grander context, because seeing the innovation, seeing how it affects your industry, your value chain, your competition, your customer, and the workings of your company, of course, in different ways, you need to change your behavior. There's new ways of organizing work. There's new ways of understanding sustainability, equality, the ethical perspectives of launching a new product. But also very interesting, I think, is that any new technology is really pushing our way towards new and interesting business models. And that's the main part of adapting to this new environment. You need to see your business in a new way. You need to see your business models, your existing business models can be challenged in many different ways based on a new innovation. And again, going back to Spotify as an example, it's really, really interesting to see that not only did they take a bundle of technologies and introduce in an app, they also redefined the way the music industry works. Nowadays, we don't pay for music in that sense. We don't pay for individual records or CDs. We subscribe to music service. And that is a totally game changer, a new way of actually understanding and building a sustainable business in the music industry. And that has changed in these 10 years. So with that, there are, again, just to take it back, to understand this and to give you a framework of actually how you think and look at new innovations. You need to understand what's out there. You need to understand when it's happening. You need to assess the implications in all the different perspectives, and you need to adapt. You need to change your behavior once you realize that these things are going to affect you. So with that, let me just finish off with a couple of numbers. 74. That's the number of billion euros that Alibaba had as in sales on Singles Day, the 11th of November, which is the biggest shopping day in China. So 74 billion euros, that's quite an amount, right? 5,000, that's how old Aubrey Gray thinks we're going to be. He's a very, very colorful researcher in longevity. I'm not saying he's right, but as a number, it's interesting. What if we're going to live a lot longer than we are today? And I think you can agree that the lifespan of our kids will be longer than ours, etc. But if we talk 100 years or 200 or 500, doesn't really matter. It means that we need to rethink society. We need to rethink our pension system, our careers. Should I work with the same thing my whole life? Should I be married to the same person for 50, 100 or 200 years? What do I know? It's just in a curious perspective, I think it challenged a lot of our existing beliefs around these things. 42,000, that's the number of satellites that SpaceX are about to send up into space to cover the world in high-speed internet. Another way of getting high-speed connectivity. 215, that's the number of million gigabytes we can fit into 1 gram of DNA. Not in your laptop today or your smartphone, but eventually maybe in the future. And then 8, that was the number of people that accepted a seat on the Google Board of Ethics a year and a half ago. Unfortunately, 0 was the number of people that were still on that board after 1 month. They had some conflicts and people were having 2 different opinions, meaning that they were afraid of being in the same room because it could damage their reputation. And I think that is dangerous. We need to sit down or stand up and talk to people with other opinions. I mean, that's the way we move things forward. But important here also is that we respect the other person's opinion, at least to a certain extent. So with that, I hope I understand if you're a bit confused after this, especially with the Christmas suit and that. But confusion, I think we should just accept it, because there's no way we're going to have a good understanding of everything that is happening around us. I hope after this that you're a bit more curious. Curiosity drives us in many different ways. Curious and a bit skeptical, as I've said. I also do hope that you're a bit optimistic. I think that we have a lot of challenges going forward, but I also see that with the help of innovation, of ingenuity, of creativity and technology. I think there's many opportunities that we can actually fix the grand challenges that we're facing here, including the climate crisis. So with that, thank you very much. May the future be with you, at least over the holidays now. Happy to open up for some questions if we have time. I'm also available for future discussions on all these different social networks, some of them more frequently than others. But just please reach out to Nicholas Bergman if you want. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicholas. Thank you for your presentation. Online applause is coming your way. Can we do it? Yeah, I'm the only one with the audio, but still, the other ones are also agreeing with me. So thank you very much. A few questions for you while we still have time. So first of all, I want to ask you, so you mentioned some technologies that you think are very important, and you talked about some mega trends. What are the problems that you would like to invest to solving the problems? What are the global challenges that you would like
to invest in? The environment is one of them, of course, that I mentioned.
Okay, but is it like because of the ethics of all of it, because of your morale? But is it also profitable? The ecological issues.
If we can find interesting business innovations or business opportunities or interesting investment opportunities that in sustainable tech. If that's what you're asking, yes, definitely. With the European Innovation Council now, we are looking at quite a few projects within wind power, wave power, solar cells. We see it in different kind of battery technologies. So that's definitely a business perspective when we look at this. And also from the financial industry, you see that large money managers, fund managers, you see insurance companies, you see sovereign wealth funds that are moving away from fossil fuels because they see an increase in business risk and financial risk in that. So of course, yes, there's plenty of interesting business opportunity also in working with the environment, for example. Definitely.
Yeah, but even talking about the ecological situation of the world, can you be more specific about which problems would you say are more worth investing or less investing? For example, getting the carbon dioxide out of the air, or investing more to alternative resources, or do you try to be that much specific in your work? I mean, do you try to foresee like these problems are the ones I want to work with?
Yeah, I understand. What I find a few things that I find really interesting from an investor perspective, if we talk about sustainability, are different kinds of battery technologies. I think that the lithium-ion batteries that we are using now, they have their challenges, definitely. So new and interesting battery technologies, that's one thing. I think solar has, the cost of solar is 1/10 of what it was 10 years ago. And that we're going to see that it's going to be even cheaper, meaning that solar is the cheapest form of energy in roughly 80 countries around the equator today. And continuing that development, investing in companies that do that, we're going to see that even in Stockholm, maybe not Stockholm in December, which is kind of dark, but even in the northern parts of the world or southern parts of the world, we will see in the future interesting solar opportunities, and investing in companies that are making that happen is of course really interesting. What else? Of course, we also looked at a few companies that work in with removing plastic, recyclable plastic, waste management, all these different things that are really interesting. On a side note to that, different ways and using technology in agriculture, using drones, satellites, getting rid of pesticides, artificial meat, things like that is also really interesting if we can use that to solve some of the hunger problems that we're seeing in the developing countries.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. And we have still some questions from the audience. Lilita is asking, how do you think, who is going to bring more changes in healthcare, startups or big companies?
I think both. I mean, what we're seeing, for example, with the COVID vaccine, where you have large established companies with infrastructure teaming up with smaller companies with innovation. I think that's a great example of how you can see these things. Healthcare there's a lot of regulations, a lot of protocols in healthcare and in pharmaceuticals, meaning that established players have already an infrastructure for that. Sometimes we can see that some of the large players, they lack the innovation capabilities. So teaming up with startups makes sense. And at the same time, for startups, teaming up with established players with the infrastructure is also interesting. I mean, and that's maybe in pharmaceuticals. In other parts of healthcare, we've seen we have digital healthcare providers in Scandinavia, for example, that disrupt the whole ecosystem around meeting a doctor, where it's now being done online more and more. So of course that happened not through the standard system, not through the established healthcare system. I mean, that came as an innovation from the startup side. So maybe in some aspects it's easier to be innovative when you come from a small company, when you don't have that much of a baggage. So I think it's both. I think we can, as established companies, you can learn, and as startups, you can definitely also learn, but maybe in a different way. Maybe not on the innovation side, maybe on the infrastructure side.
Yeah. So okay, thank you, Nicholas. Thank you very much. Thank you for your presentation, for your insights about the future of technology and what should we be looking, keeping an eye on. So thanks again also for your suit. The prize is coming your way. The Santa is going to bring it on you in a few weeks, especially for MITA. So thank you very much, Nicholas. We are going to disconnect now. And if you still have a few minutes, we have some more questions in the chat. If you have
Sure.
A few minutes, you can answer it there. So thank you very much, Nicholas.
Thank you very much. Happy holidays, everyone. Ho.
Thank you. So yeah, this was Nicholas Bergman, and now we are going to start our last presentation of the day already. Time goes fast. Edvardas Satkauskas is going to connect in just a few moments. So Edvardas, hi, Edvardas.
Yep, hi. Hello,
Hi.
everyone.
Hi, you've been here all the time, no?
Yes, I was.
Yeah,
indeed.
Okay, so you know everything how it goes. Edvardas is an entrepreneur with more than 10 years of experience in med tech industry. That means medical technology industry, leading startups from lab-based research and development projects to venture capital funded companies. He's a head of Vaizduotė, beautiful Lithuanian name for a company developing medtech, robotic and control solutions. And I guess Edvardas is going to talk about the company also in his presentation called MedTech Magic. So Edvardas, your time to shine, and we'll be back with the questions after your presentation.
Yep, thank you very much. I was hoping to get first prize for scarf, but I see Davidas already took one. So congratulations, Davidas, for nice choice, the same as mine. So share screen.
You can both share the first prize since the scars are almost identical, so it's really hard to choose. You know?
Okay, excellent. I want to talk a little bit from different perspective. We hear the quite very interesting presentations from different perspectives, from venture capital, from scientist perspective. I'm going to tell you a little bit from people who develop medical technologies perspective, and I hope it's going to be interesting for you. Please shoot questions. I'm going to try to answer after that. So Vaizduotė is a technological company, and we use Vaizduotė, or imagination in English, for innovation. and that both literally and process-wise. So what we do here, and since I was asked to talk about in, how to say, a Christmas theme, so that's about magic, and I think there is a lot of magic in what we do. And if we talk about MITA and technology, with the help of technology, we can do amazing things. And I think it is magic because we can see the invisible, we can hear the inaudible, and we can create the intangible. So meaning that with the help of technologies and different sensors, we can see way beyond our just visible light spectrum going, starting from gamma, X-ray, ultraviolet to back to the end of the spectrum of microwave and radio. And some of the spectrums are really useful, especially in MITA, and we widely use those. The same thing is with acoustic sounds, and what we hear normally, every human being, is of course very narrow banded and narrow, how to say, portion of wavelengths. And especially ultrasound, the right part of technology is very often used in MITA to see and hear what we cannot normally do. And using different kinds of technologies, those are just two examples. We can create the intangible, meaning that the technology is the intellectual property, and to bring new things into real life. And how we do this, the process is very well known. It's you can see this in the middle of the picture. Is very, very unpredictable, and it almost always starts with imagination, in this case with vaizduotė, because you have to see what is not there yet. You have to imagine things which do not exist, and only then you can use your creativity to think how to solve those problems, how to combine existing technology, so you need to invent a new one, in order to make innovation, and innovation something that is presented to on a form better than currently existing. And the path is also always following quite the similar pattern, starting with this is awesome idea, we can can work on it, and then after first attempts you say it won't work or it's terrible, and just after some magic happens in the lab, collaborating people and talking and trying to find solutions, then it turns out to be okay, and in the end everyone is happy because it's really awesome. And that process is what we do every day where we live, and we really enjoy it. And when it comes to MedTech, it's more threads to this process. It's not only one. You have to do many different things in parallel. And interestingly, you cannot ditch any of those away. You have to use all of them. So you cannot only focus on product development. You always have to bear in mind usability, IP protection, how you're going to validate the technology, the clinical trials, the quality management, because you're going to need to go through regulatory approval in the end. And in the very end, you have to think about your business and manufacturing, because it's all about that if you want to apply your device or your creation to real life. So there's also magic between those threads, because if you take very good people specialized in just one tier of actions and not collaborating between each other, the magic doesn't happen. You have to have people looking at the same problem from very different perspectives, and then you can expect the magic to happen, because then you have a full picture and you can move forward. So where do we use this magic? Well, in our company, just to give you a couple examples, we develop different kinds of devices, like ultrasound-based neurodiagnostic devices. We worked before together with Professor Ragauskas for a long time. Now we're working on different robotic solutions, which I'm going to tell you more So most of those devices are for the future of medicine, and we are really enjoying the process of developing them. So what is out there and what is the future of medicine? So we hear all the magic words in the medtech industry. And those are some of those which previous presenter Nicholas mentioned, and have to really agree with those. And those are really, if we take just medtech, medical technology, medical devices, then words like telemedicine, Internet of Medical Things, augmented or virtual reality, artificial intelligence, and robotics, those are key words if you look for who is developing what. So startups developing medtech very often focused on those areas. And you can see that medtech investments rises years after years in those sectors, specializing, of course, in some particular area of medtech, but still money is flowing there, and everyone is looking for new technologies and new ways to apply technologies. And interestingly enough, this year is kind of a strange year. Some people say we have to reinstall 2020 because it has virus, but if we take from medtech entrepreneurs' point of view, then the investors and the entrepreneurs, they tend to find themselves despite the pandemics, and at least with the data of September, the numbers were fine, and I hope this year is going to end with growth of investments into medtech. So if we look deeper into those magical words like telemedicine and Internet of Medical Things, so it's a branch of IoT in general. So is it really changing the whole landscape of medtech? I think it is, and actually the COVID-19 outbreak did well for those areas, because there is an increased requirement for telehospital services, and there is, if you add all those trends which follow medtech recently, like a focus on reducing healthcare costs, chronic diseases, surge in population, and in the other hand, shortage of physicians, and need to expand healthcare in general, those drivers, they really drive innovation forward in order to make medical care, daily medical care, more acceptable, more reachable. And if we take telemedicine, for example, if you consult your doctor via internet, it kind of solves part of the problem, but in order for a physician to make a decision or to have a qualified information about what's happening with the patient, he or she needs to have data. And how do you get this data? Usually you get this data if a patient comes to a doctor's office. But if you don't have this opportunity, then Internet of Medical Things helps there. And especially with those conditions when you have constantly to monitor patient, for example, diabetes is a huge chronic disease. And if a doctor can easily access, for example, blood glucose levels of a patient and see trends, what's happening in relation to other diseases or other activities of patients like physical exercise, etc., then the decisions may be better informed and can really make a difference. And those devices they do a number of different things, and if you take each of them, then it's the benefits are clear but not that tremendous. But if you create a system, connected ecosystem of sensors and devices around a patient, then you can capture and measure a lot of different data. You can then screen for risks, see patterns, and inform the patient itself. On the other side, the doctor can then make informed decision. So this is one really interesting mega trend. A lot of effort is put into this in medtech world, and very interesting. So another interesting thing, which already also was mentioned by previous presenter, but I'm gonna look at it precisely from medical perspective, the virtual and virtual reality and augmented reality, it is finding its way in medicine. And first of all, obviously, it's medical education and training where can create systems to standardize and create cost-effective and repeatable models for training, and create like interactive access to clinical experiences for medical students. But also it goes into more practical ways of, like, for example, augmented reality for surgery, especially with minimally invasive surgery, where surgeons use endoscopes and the minimally invasive tools to preserve tissues. At the same time, they reduce their visibility, and if you can add virtual or augmented reality to this, it really helps. And those startups are finding their way into practice, and I think slowly, but those applications are really gonna stick there. And last but not least, virtual reality for therapy and rehabilitation is really a big thing, and especially with this COVID-19 outbreak, when mental health became a really big issue, initiatives to explore possibilities to use this in treating mental problems like phobias, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, even pain management to distract your attention from pain source, etc. It's finding its way to physical rehabilitation, where you can create environments to a person who to push to the limits, do bad exercises, and that really helps. And I think those technologies can find a way there. But for me, the most interesting world is in medtech is all the magical creatures living in the medtech world. And those, I just put some random examples here with Mr. Pepper in the middle, which is a robot working as a receptionist in a hospital. But it is probably not the most advanced technology out there for robotics. Robots can do a lot of different things in hospital, well, starting from disinfecting premises to delivering drugs. Those right robots, the exoskeletons already mentioned, help people to move. And you have bionic limbs, which are also getting more and more complicated. But I think, at least in my opinion, the king of robots in medical world is the surgical robots, the one with a lot of needles in its hands. And this is the area which is progressing really fast. It's investments being really huge, and it is due to this particular robot which is in a picture. And if you can see the graph, medical robots are getting pace really fast. And if you compare it with, for example, logistic robots or field robots, it's going forward way quicker than those two areas. And in this world, having a robot is better than not having a robot. And said that, I can give you an example of a Da Vinci system, which actually started all those trends, all this trend of surgical robots entering the market. From back at 2000, they introduced their first systems, and now their growth is over 5 billion a year. So this huge company taking biggest chunk of the market of all medical robots out there. And major players who are not yet in the robotic market, or who are but with different solutions, they plan on releasing new robots basically next year, 2021. And those are very interesting solutions. Some of them are specialized, like Zimmer Biomet ROSA knee system for knee surgery. Medtronic is introducing their Hugo system. There've been some information about that. Very silent and not a lot of information about Verb Surgical, a collaboration between Google and Johnson & Johnson corporations. But this process is going to be very interesting because huge corporations are teaming up to deliver some interesting technology to market. So surgical robots is really a trendy topic, at least in my world. And we dig in deeper because every of those applications which uses robotics, like the minimally invasive surgery, the knee surgery, orthopedics, ophthalmic surgeries, neurosurgeries, you can have digging deeper into each of those. And we dig into endovascular surgical robots. And if you're familiar with endovascular surgical robots, what it is basically robots assisting an endovascular surgeon who works with tools going into the blood vessels of a patient. Basically, they go they use guide wires and catheters, go into a patient through a groin, let's say, and move their catheters and guide wires to the heart, to coronaries, or other vessels where intervention is needed, either unclogging the vessel or otherwise doing embolization and stopping the bleeding. So there are many procedures, but similarities of the technologies is the same. The surgeon uses guide wire to move to a vessel and uses X-ray to visualize the path where he or she is going. And there are several attempts to introduce robots into the market. Some of them are more successful than others. For example, one of the first system, Magellan robotic system, was introduced in 2012 and later on withdrawn from the market completely after acquisition by Auris Surgical Robotics. And then it was acquired again by Johnson & Johnson's in order to strengthen their robotic presence. And it's going to be interesting to see what's happening there. But the main reason why they withdraw the robot, even though it was quite technologically advanced, was that it needed to have a specialized catheter with a steerable tip in the end. It was quite expensive technology, like more than 2,000 euros per procedure. So it did not stick. Currently, the leader of the field is Corpath or Corindus Vascular. Last year was acquired for astonishing 1.1 billion by Siemens Healthineers, showing that this area is really, really getting pace and getting noticed by big names. Even though that the company installed only about 70 systems worldwide last year. So I don't know what the data is today. They do not provide it anymore, but at the moment of acquisition was quite not that big numbers compared, for example, with Da Vinci systems installed like more than 5,000 units. It's just 70 systems and still valuing for 1 billion euros. That was well, very, very interesting deal, and we wait to see what's happening there. And there is another company, French company, which also works in this area, and they just introduced their system into clinical trials, and recently went to joint venture with one Chinese company. But all of them, even though very technologically advanced and promising companies, they do not stick to the market, and somehow market is not accepting them. And one of the reasons, among others, is usability, because they do robotic solution for surgeons, which only focuses on visual feedback, and you don't have a tactile feedback, you don't have a haptic feedback at your hands. And what surgeons are trained to do, they use both reaction force haptic feedback from their hands and the visual feedback from X-ray machine. So basically, you take half of information away from a surgeon and trying to make a surgeon more like a video gamer than a surgeon. And if you analyze of 5 senses, touch is actually most proficient and the only one capable of simultaneous input and output. And this is very desired feature in the robotics world, in surgical robotic world. And we hear that all the time. And this is not that easy to do. And of course, the procedure has to be fully robotic. If you can do only part procedure robotically, then the system kind of loses sense, because the surgeon still has to be present. Surgeon still has to work in the same environment, in X-ray environment, and meaning that he has to wear all the heavy lead aprons to protect from X-ray, to stand nearby the X-ray machine, which causes huge occupational hazards for the surgeon, meaning they have brain cancer more often than other people. They have orthopedic problems and a number of problems caused by prolonged exposure to X-rays. And of course, time and cost, it doesn't come last. If the system is very expensive and you just can do few things with it, the question is it worth it? And we analyze those things. We know those things very well, because one of the reasons is because we are working in this field, and we, with our team, with using a magic of collaboration with a startup company, Innovative Medicina, here in Kaunas and in Vilnius, we developed an advanced robotic system, Marionette, which we hope to solve those main limiting factors of endovascular robotic systems. So our system is designed in such a way that it can sense surgeon gestures and provide close to natural tactile feedback, augmenting surgeons' actions and ensuring adequate control of the system. So basically what we do, we take surgeon out of hazardous environment in operating room and X-ray radiation, and putting him into safe environment where he can work in the same way as he is used to, and to have both senses used for operation, both for excellent visual feedback and also the haptic feedback via the tool, because the system is controlled using exactly the same instruments as the surgeon would use in manual operation. And we think that this approach is really promising in few senses. One, that it requires really short learning curve to adopt technology in real life. And two, it measures a lot of data during procedure. It can simulate procedure, and it can use the data later on to kind of move forward in development using this data, to add artificial intelligence, to add next steps to autonomy of the robotic system. And by saying that, I think the future of surgical robots is quite bright, and scientists think that too, and they kind of created a chart of levels of autonomy of surgical robots. And we are currently in level 1 or 2, if we take no autonomy as level 0, with robot-assisted surgeries, where the Da Vinci stands, and we have at some applications even task-level autonomy of the robot, when the robot can do specific subtasks which surgeon asks them to do, for example, needle insertion or incision, etc. And in order to move forward this evolution and reach, for example, supervised autonomy or even high-level autonomy, we need to work with all those magical words which I mentioned before. Robotics is not enough. Telemedicine is required in order to have this gradual process present, in order to collect a lot of data and to gradually improve the technology, because there are really quite big issues of ethical, regulatory, and legal, which require to be solved before robots can take more action. And for this, we need to collect a lot of evidence. We need to collect a lot of data to add a lot of machine learning and artificial intelligence solutions into the tested solution in order to reach full autonomy of surgical robot. And found this picture internet. I find this amusing. Probably it not look like this. Medical robots would not look like this in the future, but it's still very funny picture and of a fully autonomous surgical robot. So I think I hope you enjoyed this talk, and that's it. That's all I have to say, and happy to answer all your questions.
Yes. Edward, can you hear me?
Yes,
my battery
very well.
just died.
Yeah, I can hear you very well.
Sorry, just a second. I can't hear you at the moment. My battery of my headphones just died. I had to catch the. Can you give me just a second? Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you very well.
Yes, okay. I can't hear you yet, but I'll fix it in just a second. So thank you, Edward. Thank you for your presentation. We have a few questions in the chat. I also have a question for you. So while I go over the questions, the question from me is, what kind of technologies that used to be futuristic before do we now have in our hospitals? Could you name a few, like here in Lithuania? I was wondering, because all sounds very good, but I'm not sure if that's, I would be interesting to hear some examples.
Well, I think the medicine or medical technology is probably one of the most conservative fields, and technology adoption is one of slowest in medicine. One of the reasons is because you have to validate and prove safety and efficacy of any technologies which have impact to patient really thoroughly, and the processes are long. And if you, for example, take the frontier of technology, like best sensors available or best microprocessors available, etc., that are currently in the market, you probably won't find those installed into existing medical devices, because for a device to reach a market, it takes several years, and it has to be approved and manufactured the way it was validated in clinical trials, which also take quite a long time. So basically, in best case scenarios, you find the medical device with like 3 to 5 years old technologies installed in them. So this area is lagging a little bit, but innovation is not. And if you look for technologies in hospital, you probably would find, well, in Lithuania, there was a big news when we acquired Gamma Knife, the advanced technology for surgery, which focuses beams for surgery. It requires quite a lot of different applications, technological applications, to make it possible. So it is quite advanced technology. If you take imaging technologies, ultrasound is being fast, but kind of limited. But CT scans and magnetic resonance scans, those are technologies which are progressing quite fast. And we don't have robots in Lithuania. And one of the reasons, well, except those which we develop, of course, but not in the hospital yet. We just doing, at the best case, we're doing animal studies, but not hospital yet. But robotics is kind of interesting field from patient and hospital perspective as well, especially in the United States. Hospitals compete between each other for patients, and patients want robotics. And patients want to be treated with the help of technologies, with all the fancy names, lasers, robots, etc. And sometimes it happens that robot provides this marginal effects to a patient, to a treatment process, but still it has to be adopted because it's, a matter of fashion. A lot of hospitals buy quite fancy and expensive equipment, state-of-the-art equipment, and it's not being used enough. They just, for marketing purposes, they have, yes, we do have robots, yes, we do use those, but it's not always the case. So in Lithuanian hospitals, I'm not really sure. We probably are quite conservative and use only technologies which are time-tested and very reliable. But those state-of-the-art technologies, first of all, they reach university hospitals and then to broader care. So it very much depends on view of leading surgeon or cardiologist or whatever department we're talking about that particular person's acceptance of innovation and willingness to try new things.
Thank you, Edvardas. We still have a few questions in the chat about Vaizduotė projects. I was also watching your website during your presentation, but we are actually out of time, and the next we have a little break for us all to get some free time to maybe have some more tea or some more coffee or grab a meal or something. So a round of online applause are going to Edvardas. Slide, please, everyone. Can I see the online hands? Yeah, I can see some more of these. So thank you very much, Edvardas. Thank you for your presentation. If you could join the chat for a few questions and answers, since there are quite a few. So I guess it would be nice. And yes, we are going to have a little break now until 5 p.m. And after that, we are going to have, at 6 p.m., we are going to have the quiz Protmušis lietuviškai. So everyone is welcome to join. Quiz with Tomas Tarcevskis, 2 rounds with 20 questions. So a little bit of games for your mind. And all of this, the videos and the content of this conference is going to be online on Delphi Plus platform. You can also, everyone who is in this event will also next week receive a letter with 1 month of Delphi Plus subscription for free. So yeah, that's it for now. So hopefully you won't disconnect for the whole evening if you don't have much to do, and I would guess most, it's COVID times. So what else are you going to do? I would suggest you use the chance to go to a quiz online, at least, while we cannot go outside and to the bar. So quiz is at 6 p.m. Thanks again for all the speakers, all for the speakers. Thank you all for listening. I know it's not easy to sit in front of a screen and listen hard to these kind of topics. So thank you very much to everyone who have been here with us. If you could try a few words to know. So thank you very much. Let's go have a break and see you at 6 in the quiz. Thank you.
Merry Christmas, ladies.
Merry Christmas, Mr. Bublé.
Are you ready to sing a little jingle bells?
Yes.
Jingle bells, jingle all the way. Oh, what fun it is to ride in a one-horse open sleigh. Jingle bells, jingle all the way. Oh, what fun it is to ride in a one-horse open sleigh. Dashing through the snow in a one-horse open sleigh. All the fields we go, laughing all the way. Bells on bobtail ring, making spirits bright. What fun it is to ride and sing a sleighing song tonight.
Jingle bells, jingle bells, jingle all the way. Oh, what fun it is to ride in a one-horse open sleigh. Jingle bells, jingle bells, jingle all the way. Oh, what a lot of fun to ride and sing in a one-horse open sleigh.
Dashing through the snow,
We are dashing
in a one-horse open sleigh.
one-horse sleigh.
All the fields we go,
All the fields we go,
laughing all the way.
all the way.
Bells on bobtail ring, making spirits bright. Oh, what fun it is to ride and sing a sleighing song tonight. Jingle bells, jingle all the way. Oh, what fun it is to ride in a one-horse open. Oh, what fun! Jingle bells, jingle all the way. Oh, what fun it is to ride in a one-horse open sleigh. Jingle bells. Santa Claus is coming to town. Oh, let's go!
Labas vakaras, ponios ir ponai. Tai truputėlį reikėtų pasigarsinti savo mikrofoną. Taigi, labas vakaras, ponios ir ponai. Labas vakaras, Lietuva. Labas vakaras, mokslo mylėtojai. Sveiki visi atvykę iš MITA arba Mokslo inovacijų ir technologijų agentūros organizuotos online konferencijos Life Sciences Christmas Trends and Spells. Taigi, visus jūs srautas tiesiog turėjo nukreipti štai čia į Twitch TV. Ir ką mes dabar veiksime, mes iš tikrųjų pažaisime onlininį protmušį. Klausimas, kaipgi tą reikėtų padaryti. Taigi, ponios ir ponai, jūs ekrane matote žaidimo langą. Patogiausia žaisti yra taip, per vieną device'ą jūs stebite šią transliaciją, o per kitą, ko gero, per savo telefoną, jūs jungiatės prie pačio žaidimo. Taigi, norėdami prisijungti prie žaidimo, jūs galite arba nuskanuoti, galite rasti apačioje, arba į adresyną suvesti quiz.gerasidės.lt/MITA, arba galite dar labiau patinginiauti ir tiesiog palaukti, kol aš jums nukopijuosiu tiesioginę nuorodą. Taigi, nuoroda įkrito į chatą, tiesiog paspauskite ant jos ir jūs turėtumėte automatiškai patekti į žaidimą. Ponios ir ponai, štai tokie reikalai. Jeigu jūs jungiatės ir jums sistema sako, kad player limit is reached ar kažką panašaus ir nenori įleisti jūsų į žaidimą, tai štai čia pokalbių kambaryje aš jums pasidaliau su jumis keliomis gudrybėmis, kaip tos klaidos išvengti. Tad jeigu jūsų netikėtai nenori įleisti į žaidimą, pabandykite išsivalyti cookies arba bandykite vesti žaidimo nuorodą savo naršyklėje per incognito mode arba bandykite nuskanuoti QR kodą. Taip pat galite tiesiog paspausti ant nuorodos ir jūs turėtų nukreipti į žaidimą. Apie kągi žaidimas? Na, žaidimas, online'inis quizas iš principo apie viską. Su MITA atstovais bendravome, diskutavome, koks jisai turėtų būti. Tad priėjome tokio kompromisinio sprendimo. Bus truputėlį apie žmogaus kūną, truputėlį apie mediciną, truputėlį apie mokslą, truputėlį apie viską ir aišku, truputėlį apie šventes. Taigi planas yra toksai, tikiuosi, kad quizas jums patiks ir savaime suprantama, na, protmušės nebūtų protmušių, jeigu nebūtų paskirti prizai. Taigi apie prizus pakalbėsiu visiškai netrukus, o dabar dar kartelį tiem žmonėm, kurie galbūt tik dabar prisijungė į šią transliaciją, noriu trumpai papasakoti. Taigi vienas langas, ko gero, per kompiuterį ar planšetę yra skirtas šitai transliacijai, o kitame renginyje pageidautina, galbūt per telefoną, jungkitės į pačią žaidimo platformą. Prisijungti būtina tam, kad galėtumėte pateikti savo atsakymus į mano paruoštus klausimus. Kaipgi prisijungti, galite skanuoti QR kodą, kurį matote ekrane, arba galite vesti quiz.gerasidės.lt/MITA, arba pasinaudoti mano įdėtą nuorodą į chatą. Taigi, štai aš ją ką tik dar kartelį pasidalinau. Tiesiog paspauskite ant jos, įsivedate savo vardą pavardę ir turėtumėte pakliūti į žaidimą. Iš tikrųjų, kviečiu nesikuklinti ir sudalyvauti žaidime, todėl kad, na, nei jūsų vardo, nei pavardės čia tikrai niekas nematys, nežinos, galite žaisti po slapyvardžiu, kas visada yra smagu, ir, kaip sakant, tiesiog sudalyvauti for fun. O kad tai nebūtų vien tik tai dalyvauti vardant padalyvauti, savaime suprantama, mes turime ir prizus. Taigi, turėsime 2 turus po 20 klausimų. Kiekvieno turo nugalėtojai, top 3 nugalėtojai bus apdovanoti tokiamis dovanomis arba prizais. Pirma vieta – kubikas Rubikas, na, puiku, man atrodo, ir keramikinis puodelis. Antra vieta – puodelis, trečia vieta – puodelis su MITA simbolika. Prizus atsiimti bus galima pačioje MIToje. Manau, kad sugalvosim, kaip čia, galbūt man e-mailą parašysit, o galbūt tiesiogiai organizatoriai. Įmesiu aš vėliau jos e-mailą į chatą. Taip, pasižiūrim, matau, kad yra 40 bene žiūrovų ir prisiregistravusių virš 20 žaidėjų. Tai dar kartelį, ponios ir ponai, pakartoju, kaip prisijungti ir kas jau prisijungia, tas prisijungia, mes važiuojame į priekį. Taigi, kaip galite prisijungti prie pačio žaidimo, nes transliacija nėra žaidimas. Čia galėsite tik stebėti, bet negalėsite žaisti. Taigi, arba nuskanuojat QR kodą, kurį matote truputėlį žemiau, arba į adresų juostą vedate quiz.gerasvedėjas.lt, pasvirasis brūkšnys MITA, arba sekate nuorodą, kurią aš su jumis pasidalinau čate, pasidalinsiu ją dar kartelį. Tai ko gero paprasčiausias dalykas, ką jūs galite padaryti. Gerai, ponios ir ponai, visus, kas norėjo prisijungti, aš manau, paraginau 3 kartus, tai daugiau, kaip sakant, turbūt jau ir nebepadoru būtų. O dabar visiems jums linkiu geros kloties, leidžiu tradicinę savo žaidimo muzikėlę ir mes važiuojame į pirmąjį šio vakaro turą. Taigi, ponios ir ponai, visiems jums linkiu sėkmės, linkiu gero laiko, linkiu gero vaibo, linkiu gerų atsakymų, teisingų atsakymų arba bent jau įdomių atradimų. Tikiuosi, kad mano paruoštas kvizas jums patiks. Na, turime jau virš 30 žaidėjų, tai daugiau ar mažiau fain. Ponios ir ponai, mes pradedame šio vakaro žaidimą. Primenu žaidimą, o žaidimą organizuoja Mokslo inovacijų ir technologijų agentūra. Taigi, puiku, prasideda countdownas ir mes lekiame į žaidimą. Taip, ponios ir ponai, kokio hormono formulė panaudota MITA renginio plakate? Štai tokia, galima sakyti, formulė. Dopaminas, endorfinas, serotoninas ar melaninas? Kokiogi hormono formulė yra panaudota MITA renginio plakate? Važiuojam, ponios ir ponai. Taip, dar momentai, ką turėčiau papasakoti apie žaidimą. Į kiekvieną klausimą atsakyti jūs turėsite 20 sekundžių laiko. Laikas eina, taškai mažėja. Tad kuo greičiau, tuo geriau. Teisingas atsakymas, serotoninas, gera nuotaika. 18 teisingų atsakymų. Ir pirmieji rezultatai - Mikutis, Lina ir Internetautas, kurių šalies atstovai olimpinių žaidynių atidarimo metu eina pirmieji. Taigi, daugiausiai medalių praėjusiai olimpiadų laimėjusi šalis - Prancūzijos, šalies šeimininkės ar Graikijos. Na, olimpiada iš principo tokia, pavadinkime, opi tema, todėl kad jinai kaip ir dabar atidėta dėl koronos nefaina. Taip, dar kartelį pakartosiu, ką daryti, jeigu nepavyksta prisijungti prie žaidimo. O čia, ponios ir ponai, teisingas atsakymas - Graikijos. Graikai eina pirmieji, o šalis šeimininkė eina paskutinė. O, Achilles, hello, matyti žmonės, Mikutis ir Deividas. Varom toliau. Kokio Lietuvos miesto herbas yra pavaizduotas ekrane? Telšių, Šiaulių, Kelmės ar Pasvalio? Nežinau kodėl. Gal vaikystėje šitas herbas yra nemažai kartų matytas, man jis toksai mielas iš tikrųjų. Ir nežinau, labai man patinka šitas herbas. Čia kaip ir jautis, apraizgyta galva apiniais lyg. Pasvalys, ponios ir ponai, pusė iš jūsų šauna teisingai. Achilles on top, Deividas ir Mikutis. Nemažinam tempo, kaip vadinamos vėliavėlės, kuriamis per tam tikrą atstumą perdodami signalai. Butaforinės, semaforinės, akvatorinės ar signaltorinės. Įdomi kalba iš tikrųjų, ten su tom vėliavėlėm galima bile ką išmosuoti po teisybei. Tai kaipgi jos vadinasi? Na kągi, kol kas klausimai eina tokie apie viską. Nebejoju, kad sulauksime klausimų ir apie mokslą, ir apie žmogaus kūną. Taigi, teisingas atsakymas yra semaforinė. 17% iš jūsų yra teisūs. Achilles pirmauja, Kestas ir Deividas. Kol kas lyderiai nesikeičia, na, bet žaidimas dar ilgas. Išties. Kas anot Marko Tveno yra pavojingiausia vieta Žemėje, nes ten mirė daugiausiai žmonių. Atsakymas sudaro vienas žodis, lotyniškos raidės, vienaskaitos vardininkas. Lotyniškos raidės reiškia be lietuviškumų, š, č, ž ir taip toliau. Taigi turite įrašyti žodį, kas anot Marko Tveno yra pavojingiausia vieta Žemėje, nes ten mirė daugiausiai žmonių. Taip. Bandome gliaudyti, kas čia bus, kaip čia ką. Na, vienaip ar kitaip, čia jau artėjame prie žmogaus ir jo kūno. Įdomu, kiek žmonių, kurie prisijungė ir stebi šią transliaciją, dalyvavo ir konferencijoje onlininėje. Būtų smagu, jeigu atsilieptumėte čiate, jeigu taip buvo. Čia teisingas atsakymas lova, ponios ir ponai, pavojingiausia, nes ten mirė daugiausiai žmonių, visgi lovoje daugiausiai jų mirė. Achilės stipriai išsiveržė į priekį, Kestas ir Deividas. Koks yra vienintelis apribojimas teikiant Nobelio premiją? Įteikiama tik vyram, tik turintė mokslinį laipsnį, tik baltaodžiams ar tik gyviems. Koksgi yra vienintelis apribojimas? Nepasirodo ir Nobelio premija turi apribojimus. Būtų įdomu sužinoti, arba tiksliau tuoj pat pažiūrėsime, ar žinote, koksgi yra tas apribojimas. Ir čia teisingas atsakymas yra tik gyviems teikiama. Taip. Leaderboardas toks, Rūtas aplenkė Deividą ir žiūrėsime, kaip čia viskas toliau dėliosis. 7 klausimas. Didžiausias skaičius lošimo ruletėje kartu ir Anzelmutės amžius. Iš biplano dainos, jeigu atsimenat, turite rašyti skaičių. Koksgi yra didžiausias skaičius lošimo ruletėje? Arba Anzelmutės amžius biplano dainoje. Na, pabandykite atkasti. Čia jau, kaip sakant, daviau šansą, jau jeigu ir nelošėte azartinių žaidimų, tai gal bent jau klausėtės muzikos. Turite įrašyti skaičių. Žiūrim, ponios ir ponai, čia teisingas atsakymas yra 36. Man 16, tau 36. Rūt ir Mikutis vejasi Achilės, internetautas 4 vietoje. Žiūrim, Stanfordo universiteto mokslininkai sukūrė išmanų tualetą, kuris naudotoją atpažįsta pagal ką? Jo akies rainelę, jo kvapą, jo išangės raštą ar jo piršto antspaudą. Na, štai jums ir išradimai. Ir nepasakysi, kad laikas leidžiamas dykai. Gal skamba ir juokingai, bet po teisybei čia pakankamai toksai išmanus įrenginys. Taigi, teisingas atsakymas pagal išangės raštą. Va, turim ne tik piršto antspaudą, pasirodo. 10 atsakymų skrieja į tą pusę. Achilės surenka tokį solidų 7-7-7, 3 taškius, atsakęs į 7 klausimus iš 8. Rezultatai kol kas tokie. 9 klausimas. Pasakojame, kad Antrojo pasaulinio karo metais kartais pavykdavo išgelbėti vokiečių jūreivius arba pilotus, kurie paskandinus laivą arba numušus lėktuvą plūdurėdavo Arkties vandenyne. Pirmų reikalų jos reikdavo sušildyti. Pastebėta, kad efektyviausias šildymo būdas būdavo koks? Kūno ištrinimas alkoholiu, atsispaudimai ir pritupimai, kūno ištrinimas sniegu arba ledu, ar šildymas kito žmogaus kūnu. Na, kaip sakant, labai jau toksai į temą klausimas, kadangi už lango jau iš tikrųjų ir dabar griebia šaltukas. Tad kaipgi geriausiai, efektyviausiai sušyla kūnas. Ir čia teisingas atsakymas. Šildymas kito žmogaus kūnų, visgi palaipsninis vyksta šildymas ir vos nepavadinkime atitirpimas, jeigu būtų galima tai pavadinti. Lyderiai lieka tie patys, kiti vejasi topą. Na ir mes žiūrėsime, kaip čia viskas pasibaigs. 10 klausimas. Savo pirmos ekspedicijos po Ramųjį vandenyną metu kapitonas Kukas dėl skorbuto prarado pusę savo įgulos narių. Po 20 metų buvo pripažinta tam tikro vitamino ir šios ligos sąsaja. Ir nuo 18 amžiaus pabaigos visose Didžiosios Britanijos laivuose buvo privaloma turėti tam tikro maisto produkto užtikrinančio įgulos sveikatą. Koks tai produktas? Šviežios bulvės, svogūnai, raudonoji paprika ar citrusų sultis. Taigi, ponios ir ponai, teisingas atsakymas ir esminis skirtis krenta ant citrusų sulčių. Vitaminas C, nors iš tikrųjų, pagal logiką, tai tiek šviežios bulvės, tiek raudonoji paprika, na, gal net ir svogūnai, nenoriu dabar apsimeluoti, yra kupini vitamino C, šiaip turėtų padėti taip pat, tačiau pagal reglamentą būdavo citrusų sultis 30 ml citrusų sulčių kiekvieną dieną išgerti ir you feeling good. Achilės, Rūt ir Mikutis. Na, Achilės truputėlį užspaudė stabdį ir nusprendė leisti persekiotojam pasivyti jį, o kaip čia bus toliau. Sharon Stone yra pasakęs, kad šis veiksmas yra pats efektyviausias ginklas prieš celiulitą. Apie ką eina kalba? Lipimas laiptais, ėjimas į parduotuvę, angliavandenių dieta ar seksas. Kas tai galėtų būti? Na, turime omenyje Sharon Stone, bandykime atspėti, kągi čia galėjo turėti omenyje. Tik tak, ponios ir ponai, ir teisingas atsakymas yra lipimas laiptais. Iš tikrųjų nieko jinai, va matote, kaip klišės suveikia, klišės ir kaip tik vienas žmogus atsakė į mano pateiktą klausimą. Visgi lipimas laiptais, ponios ir ponai, nėra jokios magijos, žinokite, laipiokit laiptais. Taigi, nuo karošės sindromo kasmet Japonijoje miršta daugybė žmonių. Kokia yra šių mirčių priežastis? Mėsos stygius, jūros gėrybės, radiacija ar persidirbimas. Kaipgi ten yra su Japonija. Štai ir iš tikrųjų įsivedus į Google, pasižiūrėkit, ten įdomių fotografijų galima rasti, jeigu įvestumėt karošį. Ir teisingas atsakymas yra, tik Japonijoje turbūt, persidirbimas. Vienareikšmiškai taip, ten būna išsekę žmonės, ten ir metro ten sukritę, ir gatviai susmukė ir taip toliau. Baisu žiūrėti, iki ko save davaro. Nelabai toks taisyklingas išsireiškimas, bet taip yra. 13. Kuri pieninių dantų rūšis pradeda augti anksčiausiai? Krūminiai, kapliai, iltiniai ar kandžiai? Na ir aišku, pavyzdinė šypsena fotografijoje. Oi. Taigi, kuri pieninių dantų rūšis pradeda augti anksčiausiai? Krūminiai, kapliai, iltiniai ar kandžiai? Ir čia, ponios ir ponai, teisingas atsakymas yra kandžiai. Taip, 17 iš jūsų yra teisūs. Achilės, Mikutis ir Rūt. Čia artėja ir Saulius, Domi ir internetautas. 14. Vokietijoje, Lenkijoje, Ukrainoje manoma, kad rasti tai ant kalėdinės eglutės reiškia didelę laimę ar sėkmę. Kasgi tai yra? Laišką, voratinklį, saldainį ar kankorėžį? Na, santykinai mūsų kaimynai, tiek Vokietija, Lenkija, Ukraina, Vokietija gal ne taip, bet Lenkija, Ukraina, čia mes daugiau ar mažiau LDK ar dviejų tautų respublikos sudėties ribose, kaip ir kaimynai, pusbroliai. Teisingas atsakymas, voratinkli. Voratinklis yra very lucky veisai. Achilės, pirmasis žaidėjas, kirtęs 1000 taškų ribą. Važiuojam toliau. Kas lemia skirtingų akių spalvą? Skirtingas kraujagyslių kiekis, skirtingos įdubos rainelėje, skirtingos pigmentinės medžiagos ar skirtinga melanino koncentracija. Tai būna gyvat. Viena akis tokia, kita tokia, magiškai man tie žmonės iš tikrųjų atrodo visada. Kažkur teikčiau, kad gal gyvūnai dažniau tą turi, bet kažkur skaičiau, kad tiek gyvūnų, tiek žmonių turinčių tokį dalyką, pavyzdžiui, skirtingas akis, kiekis yra vienodas procentaliai. Čiagi teisingas atsakymas, skirtinga melanino koncentracija. O matote, aš prirašiau tų variantų, niekam čia tie variantai nepasirodė tokie įtikinami, kaip teisingasis, Achilės, Domi ir Rūt. Ponios ir ponai, 16, kurį šių išvardintų medicinos specialistų gydo ligas susijusios su žmogaus pėdomis. Podiatras, endokrinologas, pediatras ar anesteziologas. Taip, man tokia savotiška net naujiena. Buvo iš tikrųjų medicinos specialistai susijusiai su žmogaus pėdomis. Paieškoju čia su medicinos specialistais panašiai kaip su fobijomis. Vos ne kiekvienai sričiai rasti po pavadinimą. Čia teisingas atsakymas yra podiatras. Įsivaizduokite, toksai ir yra. Pediatras man irgi atrodė kažkaip tai artimesnis ir mielesnis. Achilės, galim sakyti, vienvaldis lyderis šiai akimirkai. Turime dar 4 klausimus. Rodrigo buvo jūreivis, dalyvavęs Kolumbo ekspedicijoje, atradusi Ameriką. Grįžęs į namus jis gerokai išgąsdino kaimynus, nes momentais atrodė kaip velnias. Tad buvo sučiuptas inkvizicijos. Jis kalėjo 7 metus, o kuomet buvo paleistas, tokių velnių Europoje jau buvo apstu. Dėl kogi užkliuvo Rodrigo. Jis buvo tatuiruotas, jis trūkė tabaką, jo žmona buvo indėnė, ar jisai sirko sifiliu. Kaipgi čia buvo su to Rodrigo? Ir tuoj pat, man atrodo, išnarpliusi. Jeigu netikėtai kažkas tai bando žaisti ir negali prisijungti, tai bandykite čiate duoti žinią ir, kažkaip tai bandysime jums pagelbėti. Teisingas atsakymas, Rodrigo rūkė tabaką. Iš tikrųjų, lyg ir norėtųsi ar galėtųsi pritemti prie tatuiruočių, bet visgi, netokios bėdos ant tos tatuiruotės buvo, o rūksta kaip iš velnio. Rezultatai. Achilės, Mikutis ir Saulius. Kągi daugiausiai taškų prindė žaidėjai. Lieka 3 klausimai pirmajame ture. Anot memorialinės lentos pakamintos vienoje Londono gatvėje, ant memorialinės lentos yra toks užrašas. 1854 kilusios choleros metu 12 iš 49 Brodviko gatvėje esančių namų gyventojų išvengė mirties, nes dirbo ten. Kurgi? Bravorė namuose, ligoninėje ar kapinėse. Taigi štai, kilo cholera ir kaipgi ten kas įvyko. Ojei, baisus laikai. Lygos ant lygų, ką jūs nejuokaukit, kaip sakant. Taigi, ponios ir ponai, teisingas atsakymas – bravorė. Bravorė dirbo. Kokia logika? Logika tame, kad bravorė geria alų, o ne vandenį, o štai nuo užteršto vandens ir atsiranda didžiosios choleros problemos. Achilės, Mikutis sveikino įlipusių į 1000 ir Saulius. 19. Ko vardu buvo Šekspyro dramos Hamletas pagrindinio veikėjo, Hamleto motina karalienė. Gertrūda, Ofelija, Enrietė ar Klaudija. Taigi, klasikinis kūrinys, teisingas atsakymas yra Gertrūda, 31% iš jūsų yra teisus, Achilės, Mikutis ir Saulius. Na, Sauliau, 1000, Domis dar gali šauti, 1000. Paskutinis pirmojo turo klausimas. Po 1970 metų itin sėkmingos reklamos Japonijoje įprasta kūčių vakarienę valgyti šiame tinkle. Kokiame? McDonald's, KFC, Taco Bell ar Burger King. Taigi, ponios ir ponai, su šiuo klausimu mes finišuojame pirmąjį turą, tada mes turėsime 4-5 minutėlių trumpą pertrauką. Niekur iš žaidimo su telefonais neišeikite, aš jūs visus automatiškai permėsiu į antrąjį turą. Jeigu nepavyks, tai tiesiog prisijungsite rankiniu būdu. Kaip ir minėjau, kiekvieno turo dalyvis pelno prizus. Na kągi, ponios ir ponai, teisingas atsakymas yra KFC. KFC, kas galėjo pagalvoti, na, 11 iš jūsų galėjo pagalvoti. O štai čia matome lyderius. Štai čia matome lyderius, kurie laimi pirmąjį turą. Ir visus tuos, kurie laimėjo pirmajame ture, aš kviečiu tiesiog pasidaryti screenshotą su savo užimta vieta ir parašyti e-mailą Linai Kisieliai į MITA LT. Dar kartelį pakartosiu e-mailą, taigi tie, kas laimėjot 1, 2, 3 vietas, pasidarykit screenshotą ir su juo išsiųskite Linai e-mailą. Ir susitarsite dėl prizo atsiėmimo. O dabar, ponios ir ponai, 4-5 minučių pertrauka ir mes sužaisime dar vieną turą.
Here I go out to sea again.
Just look at me standing, hair on my hold again. I'm straight in the sunshine. Well, now, no need to run. Hey, died. It's a wonderful, wonderful life. No need to laugh or cry. It's a wonderful, wonderful life. No need to run. No, no, no. It's a wonderful, wonderful life. No need to laugh, no laugh, oh cry. It's a wonderful, wonderful life. No need to run. When your legs don't work like they used to before, and I can't sweep you off of your feet, will your mouth still remember the taste of my love? Will your eyes still smile from your cheek? Darling, I will be loving you till we're 70. And baby, my heart could still fall as hard at 23. Now I'm thinking about how people fall in love in mysterious ways. Maybe just a touch of a hand.
Taigi, ponios ir ponai, grįžtame į žaidimą. Kažkaip sistema automatiškai nepermetė žaidėjų į antrąjį turą, todėl ką jums reikia padaryti, jums reikia tiesiog savarankiškai prisijungti į antrąjį turą. Ta padaryti galite keliais būdais. Vienas iš jų - nuskanuoti štai čia apačioje manęs esantį, kaip čia geriau parodyti, va taip, QR kodą. Tiesiog su QR skaneriu nuskanuojat QR kodą ir pakliūsite į antrąjį turą. Kitas variantas - savo naršyklėse įveskite quiz.gerasvadės.lt pasvirasis brūkšnys MITA 2 ir irgi galėsite papulti į žaidimą. Na, o trečias variantas yra tiesiog paspauskite nuorodą, paspauskite tiesioginę nuorodą, kurią aš pasidalinau pokalbių kambaryje. Pabandysiu dar kartelį tą nuorodą pasidalinti. Tai pasidalinau, nes matau, kad dar netiek ir daug žaidėjų prisijungia, tad turime palaukti. Ar užmėsiu akį, ar... Taip, transliacija kaip ir vyksta, viską turite matyti, tad laukiu jūsų besijungančio. Taip, neįleidžia, sako. Gerai, pažiūrėkime, kas čia gali būti. Opa. Aha, taip, truputėlį pakoreguosim tada dalyką. Galbūt. Taip, ponios ir ponai, na dabar pabandykime jungtis. Buvo, kaip sakant, nevykęs mano nustatymas, vienas paliktas. Tad dar kartelį, ponios ir ponai, arba per QR kodą, arba įsivedę quiz.gerasvedės.lt/MITA2, arba per mano nuorodą. Ačiū internetautas už pastebėjimą. Dabar jau turėtų būti viskas ok ir dabar jau turėtų leisti visus į žaidimą. Visiškai netrukus galėsime startuoti su antruoju turu. Taigi, primenu, Primenu, ačiū, internetautai, net nežinau kur, ar internetautai, net nežinau kur dėti kirti, ačiū iš tikrųjų iš pastebėjimą, būčiau, žinokite, nedasikapstęs, o ten viena varnelė uždėta ir šakės. Taigi, ponios ir ponai, dar kartelį noriu priminti, kas čia vyksta, taigi Mokslo inovacijų ir technologijų agentūra šiandien turėjo, tokią smagę, įdomią live konferenciją, reiškia, Life Sciences Christmas Trends and Spells, kur mokslininkai ir futuristai dalinosi neįtikėtinais ateities scenarijais. Na, o čia mes tiesiog praleidžiame po šios konferencijos laiką. Dar kartelį smagiai ir prasmingai. Primenu, kad žaidžiame ne šiaip sau, galite laimėti prizus, taigi pirmą vietą užėmęs žmogus laimės kubiką, rubiką ir keramikinį MITA podelį, antra ir trečia vieta taip pat bus apdovanota podeliais su simbolika. Smagu! Tikiuosi, kad smagu, pats protmušis sudarytas tokiu būdu, kad truputėlį apie žmogų, truputėlį apie mokslą, truputėlį apie viską, truputėlį apie šventes. Na, kaip sakant, visur ieškome balanso. Gerai, žiūrim, ką turim, ponios ir ponai, turim bene 30 žaidėjų. Dar kartelį priminsiu, prisijungti galite per QR kodą, įsivedę quiz.gerasidės.lt pasirasis /MITA 2 į adresinų juostą arba tiesiog pasekę mano nuorodą, kurią dar kartelį pasidalinau čiate. Jeigu niekaip negalit prisijungti, metu visą aprašą, kągi galėtumėt padaryti, kad prisijungtumėt prie žaidimo. O dabar jau galime judėti ir oficialiai skelbiu antrąjį turą atidarytų. Eina laikas ir mes kimbame į dar 20 klausimų. Visiems linkiu sėkmės, važiuojame. Dėmesio, tai deguonies atominis skaičius. Branduolinėje fizikoje tai antrasis magiškas skaičius, o pokeryje dvi tokios kortos vadinamos tuo, ko šių metų žiemą dar beveik nematėme. Turite įrašyti skaičių. Pavyzdžiui, 1. Apie kokį čia skaičių eina kalba? Na, tiem, kas yra chemijoje, tai manau iš čia bus ne problema. Tiem, kas yra branduolinėje fizikoje, irgi ne problema. Pokeristam, čia jau gal gali truputėlį iškilti problemų, bet aš turbūt būčiau tas, kuris rinkčiausi pokerio variantą išnarplioti. Čia teisingas atsakymas yra 8, nes kalba eina apie 8, tai deguonies atominis skaičius, branduolinė fizika, antrasis magiškas, o pokeryje 2 8 reiškia snowmen arba seniai besmegeniai, tai tie, kurių mes kaip ir dar šią žiemą beveik nematėme. Mikutis pirmas, Rūt ir Saulius. Puiku, ponios ir ponai, akmeninis Karolio tiltas yra vienas Prahos simbolių. Pasak legendos statytojai, kad tiltas būtų tvirtesnis, į skiedinį maišė žalių kiaušinių. Tačiau į Prahoje nebuvo gana, kiaušinių turėjo atsiųsti visos šalies žmonės. Vieno regiono gyventojai nuogastavo, kad trapus krovinys net laikys ilgos kelionės. Norėdami apsidrausti, jie padarė kai ką, dėl ko išjuokėsi visa Praha. Kągi jie padarė? Sudaužė kiaušinius dar prieš kelionę, sušaldė kiaušinius prieš kelionę, vietoj kiaušinių atsiuntė vištas ar išsiuntė virtus kiaušinius. Kaipgi ten buvo su tais uoliais, gal nesakyčiau galvotais, o gal atvirkščiai, netokiais jau ir galvotais Čekijos gyventojais, kurie norėjo prisidėti prie tilto statybos. Ir teisingas atsakymas, jie, žinokit, išvirė tos kiaušinius ir atsiuntė. Dar žinokit, jeigu būtų atsiuntę vištas, tai dar būtų visai, manau, kaip tik pramastyta, nes jos būtų tokie kaip mini kiaušinių fabrikėliai, bet ne, jie, žinokit, tik išvirė tos kiaušus. Saulius, Achilės ir Mikutis. Kaunamės toliau. Judit Vaitukaitis buvo lietuvių kilmės mokslininkė, kurios tyrimų dėka sukurtas išradimas, su kuriuo bent keletą kartų per gyvenimą tenka susidurti daugeliui žmonių. Koks tai išradimas? Dirbtinio gaivinimo pamokom naudojama lėlė, širdies defibriliatorius, namuose naudojamas nėštumo testas ar putų gesintuvas. Taigi, koksgi čia tas išradimas? Judith Vaitukaitis. I think she is from USA. Yes, no, maybe. Teisingas atsakymas, namuose naudojamas nėštumo testas. Taip, tai yra tiesa. Achilės vėl topping up, Saulius ir Mikutis. Ponios ir ponai, 4. Iš kokios šalies kilęs Cirque du Soleil? Prancūzijos, Italijos, Kanados ar Belgijos? Turėjau garbės dalyvauti jų pasirodyme su jų programa Avatar. Jeigu neklystu, buvo atvažiavę gegužės 23, ar ne? Per mano ir žmonos gimtadienį, tai vagavos, vedėme savo dukrą pasižiūrėti. Buvo visai neblogai, aš kažkaip galvojau stipriau, bet Kanada, žinokit. Kanada, teisingas yra atsakymas, Achilės, Saulius ir Mikutis lyderiai išlieka tie patys, kuriai šių garsių moterų yra priskiriami tokie žodžiai pasakyti savo kraštiečiam per kilusį badmetį karo nualintoje šalyje. Jei neturi duonos, tegul jie dabar valgo pyragus. Emilijai Pleterytei, Lenkijos karalieniai ir Lietuvos didžiai kunigaikštystei Barborai Radvilaitei, Sovietų raudonai diversantei Marytei Melnikaitei ar Prancūzijos karalieniai Marijai Antuanetei. Na, kaip sakant, visos iškilios damos ir kuriosgi iš jų žodžiai yra pacituoti. Teisingas atsakymas, aišku, čia mes nukeliavome į Prancūziją. Ir taip, vyksta įnirtinga kova, 3 žaidėjai sumušė po 300 ir virš. Varome. Kartą Aleksandras Kerenskis, Rusijos laikinosios vyriausybės ministras pirmininkas, išvyko į frontą, kur lankė ir sveikino ten kovojančius karius. Po pusdienio vizitų ministras pirmininkas grįžo į sostinę su po kaklu parešta dešinė ranka. Kasgi nutiko? Ranka nuplikė išliejus arbata, ranka buvo traumuota nuo daugybės paspaudimų, vadovą kliudė priešo snaiperis, ar vizito metu tranšėjose sprogo sviedinys. Tad kaipgi ten Kerenskiui, kasgi nutiko Kerenskiui apkasuose? Taip, primenu, kad žaidimą vedu aš, Tomas Starcevskis arba gerasėdės.lt. Jeigu jums patinka protmušiai, šiuo metu įmanomi tik online protmušiai, apsilankykite mano puslapyje Facebook'e protmušiai.com. Ponios ir ponai, ranka buvo traumuota nuo daugybės paspaudimų. Taip, ministras pirmininkas papuolė. Gerai, vyrai renka po 400 taškų, yra top 3 surinkę. Varam 7. Kalėdiniai saldainiai arba candy cane buvo pradėti gaminti Vokietijoje. Kągi reiškia jų forma? Tiesiog vokiškas praktiškumas, patogiau kabinti ant eglės, skirtas vaikam ar jaunimui, kitaip tariant Jungen, išradėjo pirmoji vardo raidė ar pirmoji Jėzaus Kristaus vardo raidė. Na, kaipgi čia gali būti, tuoj pat mes ir išsiaiškinsime. Aha. Laikas sukapsi ir teisingas atsakymas. Pirmoji Jėzaus vardo raidė, ponios ir ponai. Aleliuja tiem, kurie atsakė teisingai, tai yra Sauliui. Ir jisai užsilipa į pirmąją lentelės vietą. Sveikinu su tuo, 19 amžiaus Paryžiuje ši įstaiga tapo viena populiariausių turistinių objektų, ypač po renovacijos. Išskirtinis bruožas buvo vitrinos viduje, kurios atliko praktinę paskirtį. Kokia tai įstaiga? Zoologijos sodas, morgas, viešnamis ar našlaičių prieglauda. Nagi, bandome atsikapstyti, apie kągi čia eina kalba. Primenu, žaidžiame ne šiaip savo MITA organizuotame žaidime, top 3 rezultatai bus apdovanoti simboliškais prizais. Morgas yra teisingas atsakymas, netokio ir populiarumo susilaukė, viešnamis aišku būtų faina, bet ne, tai nėra teisingas atsakymas. Gerai, važiuojame toliau. Kokie žmogaus kūno dalyje yra siuvėjo raumuo? Galvoje, kojoje, rankoje ar nugaroje? Čia nežinau, čia tiem, kas žino, tai jau žino, o tiem, kas nežino, aš nežinau. Manau, kad turėtų būti sunku atspėti. Nes iš principo atsakymas kaip ir kertasi su logika, teisingas atsakymas yra kojoje, o lyg turbūt man kažkaip lyg norėtųsi rankoje, o pasirodo jums didžiai daliai norėjusi nugaroje. Saulius on top, Achilės ir Mikutis. Šie ponai surinkė po 500 ir daugiau taškų. Kaip vadinasi menas, kuriamas meninio išsilavinimo neturinčių žmonių? Naivusis, kuklusis, liaudiškas ar vaikiškas? Čia dažnai sako dabar, iš principo yra populiaru sakyti, kad jeigu man patinka tai, ką dariau, tai man ir nereikia to išsilavinimo, nes žmogus jisai, kaip sakant, pats atsirenka, kas jam tinka. Taip, aš beveik sutinku, išskyrus, nebent jeigu tu esi medikas. Panašiai, naivusis menas, tai yra naivusis menas, liaudiškas, didžiai daliai pasirodė, bet ne, Achilės, Mikutis ir Saulius. Ponios ir ponai, įpusėjame antrąjį turą. Garsus biologas, genetikos pradininkas, atlikęs genetinio paveldimumo bandymus su geltonaisiais ir žaliaisiais žirniais. Kasgi jis toks? Gregoras Mendelis, Avicena, Renė Lanekas ar Filipas Drinkeris? Taip. Ir štai čia paveiksliukas toks, kaip sakant, genetinių tyrimų, genetinių turbūt jau bandymų, net pasiekmė, pasakyčiau. Taip. Sukapsi laikas, teisingas atsakymas, Gregoras Mendelis ten vežiojas ir dėliojas tuos žirniukus, Achilės, Mikutis ir Saulius. Ponios ir ponai, lieka 9 klausimai, kur iš šių raidžių iškrenta iš 3 karalių konteksto K, L, M ar B. Kaip ne kaip šventės, kokios jos jau bebūtų. Šį kartą šventės, aš manau, taip jau labai susitraukė iki namų, nors kitas iki gal taip ir geriau. Gal taip ir geriau, juk šventės apie šeimą, šventės apie ramybę ir šventės apie buvimą kartu. Teisingas atsakymas, aišku, čia yra L, Kasparas, Merkelis ir Baltazaras. Štai ką reiškia tos raidės, Achilės, Mikutis ir Saulius. Kaunamės, Jingle Bells daina buvo sukurta ne kalėdoms, o padėkos dienai. Tiesa, tai ir melas. Jingle Bells daina buvo sukurta ne kalėdoms, o padėkos dienai. Ponios ir ponai, čiagi teisingas atsakymas yra taip. Taip ir buvo, nelabai jums patiko šitas atsakymas. Achilės, Mikutis ir Saulius, netinga kova. Topė. 14. Kuris žmogaus piršto nagas auga greičiausiai? Mažylio, bevardžio, nykščio ar rodomojo arba smiliaus. Taigi, kuris žmogaus piršto nagas auga greičiausiai? Manom išsiaiškinti, kaipgi čia yra. Ir teisingas atsakymas yra, žinokit, rodomojo visgi smiliaus, kaip nebūtų keista. Aš kažkaip būčiau sakęs, kad nykščio, bet pasirodo, žinokit, nykščio auga lėčiausiai. Achilės, Mikutis ir Saulius. Kiekvienais metais Londono gyventojai gauna dovanų eglutę, kur statoma Trafalgaro aikštėje. Kas ją dovanoja? Rusija, Kanada, Islandija ar Norvegija? Kuda ta tokia eglelė, iš tikrųjų, gal mes jau išlepę nuo tų stebuklingų eglių, kuris čia stato ir jau kiekvienas mūsų Lietuvos miestas čia per kalėdas jau verčiasi per galvą. O ten kažkaip, žinokite, viskas kur kas paprasčiau, ką jau kalbėti, Londonas, megapolis. Teisingas atsakymas Norvegija. Norvegija dovanoja jiems tą eglutę dėl to, kad padėjo jiems nacių okupacijos metu. Britai ištiesė pagalbos ranką, Achilės, Mikutis ir Saulius. Vyrai grūmėsi tarpusavėje kaip liūtai, 3 po 900. Dėl šios ligos kas 30 sekundžių pasaulyje yra amputuojama koja. Kokia tai liga? Diabetas, artritas, sepsis ar vėžys? Na, toks truputėlį man tas klausimas kažkaip tai nelabai skaniai kramtėsi, bet vėlgi, protmūšis yra protmūšis, o žinoti, ko gero reikia ne tik smagius dalykus, ar ne? Ir čia teisingas atsakymas yra diabetas. Diabetas štai tokia pavojinga liga. Na nieko savo, kad viršuje ten vyručiai įsigazavę. Įsigazavę tai įsigazavę. 17. Į specialų DNR banką bus surinkti visų JAV kariškių DNR pavyzdžiai. Šio banko vadovas pareiškė, kad nuo šiol JAV armijoje jų nebebus. Kogi nebebus JAV armijoje? Šnipų, sadistų, nežinomų kareivių ar homoseksualistų. Kogi nebus JAV armijoje nuo šiol? Na, toksai pažadas iš DNR banko vadovo. Ir apie ką jis kalbėjo. Bandykime išsiaiškinti. Čiagi teisingas atsakymas, ponios ir ponai, yra nebebus nežinomų kareivių, kadangi DNR bankas yra, visų duomenys yra, tad, kaip sakant, kokštelį tai atsinešė ir iškart nustatyta, kasgi ten per žmogus. Achilės, Saulius ir Mikutis lieka 3 klausimai. Vienos knygos veikėjui, biologų, jo neišprusę draugai vietoje X padovanoja Y. Veikėjas filosofiškai svarsto, kad galų gale skirtumas tai yra kryptyje. Tiek žodis X, tiek žodis Y baigėsi tomis pačiamis 6 raidėmis. Įrašykite tą sutampančią pabaigą. Taigi, biologui neišprusę draugai vietoj X padovanoja Y, veikėjas sako, kad galų gale skirtumas tai yra kryptyje. Kągi, tad įrašykite tų abiejų daiktų dovanų pabaigos sutampa, įrašykite tą pabaigą, kurią sudaro 6 raidės. Sunkus klausimas, manau, kad gali būti čia jau, kaip sakant, lemiamas šūvis, o čia teisingas atsakymas yra skopas, ponios ir ponai, skopas. Norėjo mikroskopo, padovanojo teleskopą, galų gale skirtumas tik į kurią pusę pažiūrėsi. Wow, Sauliau. Saulius įkerta šitą klausimą ir panašu, kad deda tašką žaidime, nors visko dar gali nutikti. Tam tikros žmogaus kūno dalis auga visą gyvenimą. Pasirinkite teisingą atsakymą, kurigi iš šių kūno dalių auga visą gyvenimą. Speneliai, pirštai, pėdos ar ausis. Na, toksai žaidimas. Na taip. Smagu. Vienoks smagu. Tuoj pasižiūrėsime, kuomgi baigsis šis klausimas ir po jo turėsime dar vieną klausimą, kuo ir finišuosime antrąjį kvizą. Teisingas atsakymas – ausis. Ausis auga ir neperstoja augti. Na kągi, iš tikrųjų, šiek tiek tokia intriga, Achilės dar gali perlaužti Saulių. Paskutinių klausimų, ar tai pavyks, na, čia jau ir negaliu atsakyti, bet žiūrėsime. Taip, aš tik tai nusikopijuoju. Žiūrime, kaipgi čia pasibaigs šitas žaidimas, ponios ir ponai. Varom. Dėl kokios priežasties nuotraukose gali būti stebimas raudonų akių efektas. Per didelis aplikos apšvietimas, tai yra tinklainės kraujagyslių atspindys, dėl netinkamos nuotraukos ryškinimo ar netinkamas blikstės šviesos bangos ilgis. Toks klausimas, kaip ir suktas. Kaip ir vėl nežinom. Taip pat pasižiūrėsime, kaipgi čia viskas yra. O čia teisingas atsakymas, ponios ir ponai, tai yra tinklainės kraujagyslių atspindys. Štai su tokiu klausimu finišuojama antrąjį turą, atsakysiu yra 11 ir rezultatai. Saulius laimi šį žaidimą, Achilės antroje vietoje, o Mikutis lieka trečioje. Ponios ir ponai, tokie tad buvo 2 turai, laimėtojai pasidaro print screeną ir parašo čiate nurodytų e-mailų Linai atsiimti prizus. Primenu, pirma vieta įsteigta MITA yra Rubikas kubikas su podeliu, antrąją, trečia vieta puodeliai. Ponios ir ponai, smagu buvo jūs čia matyti šią valandą ir žaisti su jumis. Primenu, kad šis protmūšis buvo organizuotas Mokslo inovacijų ir technologijų agentūros MITA ir tai buvo šios dienos renginio Life Sciences Christmas Trends and Spells tęsinys. Su jumis buvau aš, Tomas Traceckis arba gerasvedėjas.lt. Jeigu jums patinka tokio pobūdžio žaidimai, kviečiu apsilankyti mano viešose žaidimuose. Juos rasite facebook.com/protmušiai.com. Kągi, dar kartelį ačiū už dalyvavimą, linkiu jums gražių, jaukių švenčių ir iki pasimatymo. Saugokitės ir likite sveiki.